anime autopsy here, and we need to have a conversation about Luffy's mum, because I am genuinely convinced that we as a community have lost the plot on the one actual clue Oda handed us. We are out here zooming in on every random woman in a crowd shot, doing 2-0-minute breakdowns on Fuchsia Village bar lady equals secret Yonko, and meanwhile the author literally carved the answer into dragon skin, and we just shrugged and moved on. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And the theory thumbnails are a whole category at this point. Luffy's mum is Crocodile, Port Gas D, Rouge 2.0, Rouge 2.0, some revolutionary we haven't met yet. It's the same recycled lineup, the same screenshots, the same Oda is a genius, this was planned from chapter 1-inch caption. And here's the thing, almost every single one of those videos somehow forgets that Dragon's tattoo even exists. They will circle his scar, they will circle his cloak, they will write essays on his hairstyle. The giant, asymmetrical, carefully drawn mark across his face and arm, background decoration, wallpaper. Listen to me. That tattoo is not random ink. That is not Oda doodling because the design sheet looked a little empty. This is the most concrete visual piece of foreshadowing we have about Luffy's mother. Her origin, her ideology, and why she had to disappear. Once you actually track how that pattern shows up around Fuchsia Village, around the Goa Kingdom fire, around the exact circumstances of Luffy's birth, you cannot unsee it. It stops being a cool design and starts reading as a clan mark, a homeland emblem, a walking spoiler Oda has been politely hiding in plain sight. And I say this with love. I say this as someone who has spent an embarrassing percentage of my adult life crawling through SBS volumes, zooming in on design drafts, and checking panel placements like a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. I have read the interview where Oda says Luffy's mother is already drawn. I have stared at Rayleigh's line on Sabaody about not prying into family. I've reread every scene where Garp dodges questions about Luffy's parents, and every moment Dragon talks about his son, but never once mentions the woman who gave birth to him. At some point the coincidence pile stops being cute and starts being a problem you have to solve. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to forget, temporarily, every maybe Ginny is the mum post, every that Lucia woman had the same vibe comment, every revolutionary side character the fandom has tried to stuff into this role. This is not a sin, this is fine. This is normal pattern hunting behavior. But in this video, we are not doing vague vibes. We are not doing she kind of looks maternal storytelling. We are going to take Dragon's tattoo, Oda's own statements, the way he foreshadows parents from Roger and Ace to Sanji's family, and we are going to run a brutal, receipt-heavy autopsy on all of it. By the end, you will either agree that Dragon's tattoo is a direct line to Luffy's mother's homeland and to the ideology that turned him into the world's most wanted man, or you are going to have to explain away an absolutely terrifying amount of intentional detail as coincidence. And if you can do that with a straight face, I genuinely want to hear how. So before we dive into diagrams and start treating Dragon's tattoo like a crime scene photo, we need to talk about stakes. Because I can already hear the comment typing itself. Oda said Luffy's mum isn't important, stop overthinking it. And on the surface, fair, sensible, as heard, responsible adult take. Except here's the thing. Oda did not say she's irrelevant to the world. He said she's not important to Luffy's adventure. That is a category difference. Not important to Luffy deciding to sail out of Fuchsia with a barrel and a dream is not the same as not important to why Dragon became a terrorist in a cloak with a weather fetish, or not important to the Will of D bloodline or the political map of the Goa Kingdom. The community keeps collapsing those categories and then acting shocked when the story refuses to stay small. I need you to sit with how Oda actually uses parents. Parental reveals in One Piece are never about, oh wow, that explains your hair color. They are late-game emotional nukes that reframe entire arcs. Roger being Ace's father turns Marineford from Save the Cool Fire guy into the world government is publicly executing the Pirate King's son as a message to every D. Sanji's parents don't just give him a tragic childhood, they retroactively weaponize his goofy Mr. Prince persona, his bounty weirdness, his North Blue origin. Big Mom's flashback takes a Saturday morning cartoon villain and turns her into a walking case study in systemic child abuse and state-sanctioned monsters. And we're really going to assume Luffy, the main character, is the one exception? That his mother is the single time Oda goes, whatever, she's just some lady. Listen to me, that is not how this author writes. Now, Dragon. Right now, Dragon is a missing middle. We have Garp, the marine hero. We have Luffy, the Chaos Gremlin sun god. In between them is the world's most wanted revolutionary who one day pivoted from my dad is a Navy legend to I will topple the celestial regime. Why? Why oppress kingdoms? By Grey Terminal. Why was he eerily calm in Logtown, watching his own son about to be executed, as if this was expected every single week? You cannot answer those questions cleanly without asking, who did he fall in love with and what did she represent? If Luffy's mother is from a persecuted clan, or a burned kingdom, or a specific tribe that the world government tried to erase, suddenly the Goa Kingdom's clean surface burning trash heap isn't just social commentary, it's personal. Fuchsia stops being random backwater, Luffy stops being some kid from East Blue, and becomes the inevitable collision point of two targeted bloodlines. So here's what we're going to do. We need to stop treating Oda said she's not important as a shutdown and start treating it as a constraint in the writing. This is not a sin, this is normal. An author can downplay a character's adventure relevance while still loading them with world-building shrapnel. Over the next 2 hours, I'm going to build this out methodically. First, we fix how we think about hints and foreshadowing, so we're not just pattern-seeking monkeys seeing Jesus in toast. And we walk through every canon mention and omission around Luffy's family. Garp's evasions, Rayleigh's refusal to answer, Ivankov's weird familiarity. And only after that groundwork do we put Dragon's tattoo under the microscope and land on a concrete, evidence-backed candidate for Luffy's mother, whose existence makes Dragon's ideology, his disappearance, and that ink all snap into focus. If that sounds overconfident, good. Because for the theory to fail, you're going to have to argue not just that one panel is a coincidence, but that Oda accidentally built an entire invisible character arc by mistake. So that's the bar. Not I saw a swirl and thought of a womb, but Oda accidentally built an invisible character arc. And now you glance down and see the timestamp and go, 2 hours? For Luffy's mum? Yes, 2 hours. 2 hours and change. And here's the thing. If you've ever watched one of those definitive Luffy's mum explained in 10 minutes videos, you already know why this has to be long. Those are not investigations. Those are PowerPoint presentations with feelings. They cherry pick a Logtown panel, slap on the SBS quote where Oda says I've already drawn her, mention Dragon's tattoo once, and then just free associate. Maybe it's that woman in the crowd. Maybe it's that lady in the Goa flashback. Maybe it's crocodile. 10 minutes, no categories, no definitions, no method. The community eats it up, screenshots a frame, and suddenly it's confirmed on Twitter. Listen to me. If we are going to say Dragon's tattoo reveals Luffy's mother, we need to do something much more painful than that. We need to actually treat this as writing, not astrology. That means SBS columns, design commentary, timeline logic, and Oda's patterns with parents, all on the table at once. Not just the one cool shot of Dragon in the rain. But here's the roadmap. So you can't say I dragged you in without warning. First, I'm going to build a conceptual framework. Foreshadowing versus retrofitting versus what I call pre-writing in the other video. Foreshadowing is intentional setup. Retrofitting is intentional reuse. Pre-writing is when the author already knows the answer and is just revealing fragments out of order. This is not a sin. This is normal. But if you mix those categories, every hint becomes whatever you want it to be. Then we apply that to parents. Roger and Ace. Big Mom's flashback. Sanji's parents and the way his bounty, his alias and his origin quietly stacked until Oda pulled the trigger. I need you to see how Oda treats mothers and fathers when they matter to the story versus when he keeps them off screen on purpose. Only after that do we narrow the lens. Dragon as a character. The late addition of his tattoo. Oda's habit of hiding clan and homeland in body markings, and the revolutionary women the fandom keeps throwing against the wall. Ginny, the Lulusia woman, Every mysterious revolutionary lady that gets promoted to secretly Luffy's mum because she made eye contact with Dragon once. Why am I so hung up on definitions? Because if we don't agree on what counts as a real intentional hint versus a retroactive justification, the entire Oda already drew Luffy's mum. Conversation collapses into noise. Your pattern-seeking monkey brain sees Jesus in toast. My pattern-seeking monkey brain sees a tattoo and a birth record. Without rules, we're just arguing about toast. So here's my playful threat. If you're going to dive into the comments and tell me I'm wrong, you at least owe yourself the intellectual honesty of hearing the full case. Because the receipts are coming. They are long, they are documented, and they are not gentle. So when someone posts 2 panels, Dragon's arm in Logetown and some random swirl in Wano, and screams, Oda planned this 20 years ago, I need you to understand what my brain does. It doesn't go, wow, genius. It goes, ah yes, the pattern-seeking monkey has logged on again. We are a community that can see Jesus in toast and then write a 4-0 tweet thread about gluten-based foreshadowing. Here's the thing. This overreaction isn't just annoying. It actually disrespects Oda's real craft. When every vaguely similar spiral, every recycled line of dialogue, every background extra becomes 5D chess, you erase the actual difficulty of weekly writing. You turn a human author, working on deadlines, revising on the fly, into an omniscient storyboard god who never improvises. And that's not what's happening on the page. Oda absolutely plans. He absolutely documents. He also absolutely goes, that design choice I made 10 years ago? I can use that, and retrofits it into something richer. This is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal. The problem is when fans refuse to admit that category exists and shove everything into perfect foreshadowing because it feels more impressive to worship a magic trick than to analyze a technique. Now, why does this matter for Dragon's tattoo and Luffy's mother? Because if this theory is going to stand up to any scrutiny at all, we need to separate what Oda intentionally set up from what we are inventing after the fact. Foreshadowing has to be intentional. It has to be planned. Retroactive meaning can be cool, can be emotional, can be thematically gorgeous, but it does not prove that every curve of ink on Dragon's arm is a secret genealogy chart. Not all cool connections are created equal. Some are foreshadowing. Laboon and Brook. The Nika Sun motifs, Sanji's Mr. Prince persona. Some are retrofitting, turning Skypier's mantra into hockey, or taking Kinemon's dragon gag and loading it with Wano trauma. And some are just thematic resonance, where an author repeats shapes, symbols, or phrases because they feel right for the story's emotional grammar. If we don't sort those categories, we end up pointing at every swirl on Dragon's arm and yelling, Hidden Wano clan proof, every Tuesday. Pattern interrupt. What if I told you Dragon's tattoo could be important and still not be foreshadowing? What if it's evidence of something even more terrifying for this theory? That Oda made certain decisions before Chapter 1 and has been quietly writing around them ever since. So listen to me. Before I walk you through Rayleigh's line about not prying into family, Garp's evasiveness, and that SBS where Oda admits Luffy's mother is already drawn, we need to build a stricter framework, a 3-part model, foreshadowing, retrofitting, and something I'm calling pre-writing. Only then can we judge whether Dragon's tattoo is a real clue to Luffy's mother, or just a beautifully convenient accident. So before we start accusing random background women of being Luffy's mum, we need to get our vocabulary straight. I need you to know what game we're actually playing here, because the community throws around foreshadowing for everything from Laboon to a cloud that vaguely resembles Joy Boy's haircut. A week. Foreshadowing, in the strict sense, is boringly specific. It is when an author intentionally plants an element early because they already know the later payoff and are setting it up on purpose. The key word is intentionally. The setup and the payoff are planned together, even if they're written years apart. You put the gun on the mantelpiece in Act 1 because you already have the murder in Act 3 outlined in your notes. So when Oda shows us Laboon in East Blue, that's not a cute coincidence. That's foreshadowing. Brook and Laboon's promise were conceived as a single unit of storytelling. Same with Sanji's weird bounty poster, his Mr. Prince persona, his North Blue origin. Those weren't fun little accidents that later turned into Germa. Those were parts of a planned reveal Oda was deliberately orbiting for a decade. Anime is different. Retrofitting is different. Retrofitting is when an author takes an earlier, relatively flexible detail and later assigns it new meaning to serve a twist or a theme. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how most serialized storytelling survives past year 3 without collapsing into sludge. You decide that the decorative vase in the background was actually the murder weapon all along, and suddenly an old panel becomes deep. Think about early Mantra in Skypiea being rebranded as Haki. Was every single usage mapped out from day one? Probably not. But Oda saw a tool he'd already put on the table, realized it fit his evolving power system, and retrofitted it. This is fine. This is normal. The problem is, when fans call every retrofit god-tier foreshadowing, and then expect other authors to compete with a standard that literally doesn't exist. Which brings us to the third category, and here's the thing. This is where Oda gets weird. I'm calling it pre-writing. Pre-writing is when an author designs the world-building, symbols and character motifs far in advance, even if they don't yet know the exact scene they'll pay off in. The ending, the big reveals, the ideological spine are already decided. The author is just unveiling them out of order. In our murder room metaphor, foreshadowing is writing the gun and the murder at the same time. Retrofitting is later deciding the vase was the weapon. Pre-writing is stocking the room with guns, vases, ropes, and poison because you know you're going to commit some kind of murder, you just haven't picked which object gets the close-up. Oda pre-writes. He has said he hides clan hints and world-building in body markings. He knew the Void Sentry, the Will of D, the ancient weapons long before Chapter 1. So when he slaps that swirling storm pattern tattoo on Dragon, that is not random ink. That is a pre-written symbol, a piece from a toolbox of motifs tied to a specific cultural and ideological origin. And here's where Dragon's tattoo becomes dangerous. If this video's argument is right, that mark sits exactly at the intersection of pre-writing and foreshadowing. It's a symbol Oda baked into Dragon's design because he already knew what kind of woman he had a child with. Once that symbol exists, it quietly locks in who Luffy's mother has to be. Which means if we can decode the tattoo's origin, we're not pattern-seeking monkeys seeing Jesus in toast. We're reading a decision Oda made decades ago. So, with those three categories in place, we can finally ask the real question, which one does Luffy's unseen mother fall into when you line up Rayleigh, Garp, the SBS, and that tattoo? So before we start surgically dissecting Dragon's tattoo and assigning it to Luffy's hypothetical mum's hometown, we need to slam the brakes on a huge misconception in this community. I need you to understand what weekly manga actually looks like from the author's side, because otherwise we drift into this fantasy where Oda is a time-traveling god who plotted every eyebrow hair in 1997. Here's the thing, a weekly mangaka is doing 15 to 20 pages. Every single week. That's storyboards, pencils, inks, tones, corrections, plus constant editorial meetings where some poor editor is waving reader surveys in your face going, hey, rankings dipped, can we get a bigger fight? Baby show Zorro? You're not leisurely crafting a novel. You're running a sprint marathon while juggling chainsaws. You add on the physical toll. Carpal tunnel, back problems, hospital trips. Oh, by the way, you haven't slept in 3 days because the anime team needs a design sheet for Dragon by tomorrow. This is where hiatuses, health scares, and full-on breakdowns come from. The problem isn't that authors are lazy. The problem is that the system is engineered to chew them up and spit out pages. Now layer in external pressure. Magazine rankings decide whether your series lives or dies. Anime schedules demand that a certain arc hit a certain beat by a certain core. Merch teams want more cool forms, more new outfits, more side characters they can turn into keychains. That means editors can and do say, speed this arc up, slow this mystery down, pivot that reveal, a perfectly pre-planned, untouched 20-year narrative, structurally impossible. The blueprint exists, but the house is being remodeled mid-construction because the landlord wants a bigger kitchen. So what do smart authors do? They plant flexible seeds. They throw in a mysterious tattoo, a weird family comment, a half-mentioned island. Not because every single one has a precise fixed payoff from day one, but because those seeds give them options. Years later, they look back and decide which ones to water based on what still fits the evolving world building. This is not a sin. This is survival. We need to stop acting as if retrofitting is bad writing. Retrofitting is a category of perfectly valid storytelling. You take something old and assign it new meaning, intentionally to reinforce where the story has grown. This is normal. This is fine. And in a weekly grind, it's the only way to keep a 25-plus year epic from collapsing under its own weight. So no, Oda is not an omniscient god who had every panel of Dragon's tattoo, every silhouette of Luffy's mother planned in microscopic detail from chapter 1. But he is a master improviser with a terrifyingly huge pre-written toolbox. He knew the ending, the big mysteries, the emotional destinations. Then week by week, under all this pressure, he's been choosing which tools to pull out, which old detail to promote from background noise to capital F. Which means when we stare at Dragon's tattoo and start asking, is this Luffy's mother? We should expect a hybrid, some genuine long-term planning, some retrofitting, some pre-written symbolism Oda finally cashes in near the endgame. And the real question becomes, how do we tell which parts of that ink were always about her and which parts Oda weaponized later? So before we start seeing Luffy's mum in every swirl of ink on Dragon's face, we need to slow down and talk about what real foreshadowing actually is, not the meme version, the literary version. Because if we don't nail this, every cool pattern becomes secret mom lore, and the word foreshadowing just dissolves into soup. Here's the thing. Foreshadowing is about intent. Intent, not coincidence. In the strict sense, foreshadowing is when an author intentionally plants an element early because they already know a later event and want that future moment to feel earned. The setup exists to serve a payoff the author has already planned, not might use, not could be fun, but has in their notes as a real coming scene. Anime tray of innovation. Every single week, general definition is nice, but I need you to see it in a tiny story. Imagine a simple 3-act drama about a teacher named Mara. In Act 1, she's at a school picnic, and there's a throwaway exchange where she refuses to go on the lakeside boat. She jokes, "I can't swim, water freaks me out," and we see her grip the dock rail a little too hard. No spooky music, no slow zoom, it's just character texture. Act 3, there's a storm. A student falls off a collapsing bridge into that same lake, and Mara is the only one close enough to jump. Now the audience doesn't need a narrator yelling, "She's afraid of water." They remember. The earlier line snaps into focus. Her fear isn't a random trait. It's the axis of the climax. That Act 1 moment was foreshadowing because the author wrote it knowing from day one, I'm going to throw her into a drowning or save them choice later. Notice something else in that example. It's not subtle in the sense of invisible. It's right there. She says she's afraid of water. The camera lingers. Incompetent storytelling, foreshadowing is often obvious on reread, sometimes even on first watch. And this is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal. It feels natural because it's woven into character and world building rather than underlined in neon. Now, because this community is full of pattern-seeking gremlins who see Jesus in Toast and Joy Boy in every sundoodle, we need to quietly install some criteria. When I say this is foreshadowing, I'm going to mean 3 things. 1. The setup is specific enough that coincidence stops being the most reasonable explanation. 2. The payoff actually matches that setup in a consistent way. You don't have to twist yourself into a pretzel to connect them. 3. Nothing in the middle, including the author's own commentary, flat out contradicts that connection. Those are the glasses I want you wearing, because when we turn back to Dragon's tattoo, its weird storm dragon shape, the exact placement on his face, and the fact that Oda added it late in the design process, you'll see it starts behaving much more like Mara's fear of water. Listen to me. If that mark really is tied to Luffy's mother, it should pass those tests. And in the next section, we're going to start stress testing it until either the theory breaks or everything else does. So before we start stapling Luffy's mom onto Dragon's face tattoo, we need to talk about a very unsexy word, retrofitting. Because if we don't, you're going to turn into that pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Oda draws a swirl. Here's the thing. Retrofitting is not mystical, it's very concrete. Retrofitting is when an author goes back to an old, underspecified detail, a scar, a side character, some throwaway line about an island, and later decides, okay, that's actually part of this new plot thread. The detail existed. It was vague. Then, years later, it gets adopted and given a job. The gun was already on the mantle, but only in draft 12 did the author decide who was going to fire it. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how most long-running manga, TV shows and comics survive past year 3. Nobody, not even Oda with his murder wall of notes, can perfectly foresee every twist, every side character, every SBS question fans will obsess over a decade later. But they leave wiggle room. They plant soft details that can be upgraded later. This is fine. This is normal. The quality test is not was it planned from day one. The test is, does the retrofit feel organic? Good retrofitting respects what we already know. It doesn't contradict earlier scenes. It snaps into them. When you reread, the new meaning enhances those old panels. Skypierre's mantra being formalized as haki is a perfect example. You can feel that Oda didn't have the full haki system locked in, but when he retrofits it, it doesn't break anything. It actually makes Skypierre richer. Bad retrofitting is the opposite. Bad retrofitting is when the new explanation openly fights the canon you already have. It feels desperate, like the author is standing on your coffee table yelling, "Twist, are you shocked yet?" That's when the community starts losing trust. You get contradictions, personality reversals, or reveals that only work if you forget half the story you read. So when we stare at Dragon's tattoo and go, secret clan mark from Luffy's mother's homeland that explains his ideology, his absence, and Oda's already drawn her comment, we need to be honest about which category we're in. Are we, the fans, retrofitting meaning onto a cool but originally shallow design? Or did Oda himself quietly retrofit that mark once he locked in the endgame, turning it into an intentional carrier for Luffy's mother's origin? Listen to me. Those are very different claims. One is us doing creative fan writing. The other is us accusing Oda, in a good way, of long-term, weaponized subtlety. The job of this video is to sort that out. We need to walk through Dragon's appearances, Oda's interviews, and the patterns he uses for parents in general, and then decide whether this tattoo theory passes the organic retrofit test or collapses into coincidence. And to do that, we have to drag in every scrap Oda has ever given us about Luffy's mother and see what actually sticks to that ink. And before you start freehanding conspiracy charts off Dragon's tattoo, I need you to come with me to a safer battlefield, Naruto. Because the Naruto community already lived through a version of this with Toby. Toby pulls off the mask, he's Obito, and overnight the fandom went from, who is this goofball, to wow, the foreshadowing was so obvious, how did anyone miss it? Every cracked mask panel, every sharing and close-up, every vague line about that kid. Here's the thing, a lot of those hints were so generic they could have supported 3 different answers. Fans will tell you Toby's spiky hair was clearly Obito. His playful, almost stupid personality was clearly Obito. His familiarity with Kakashi was clearly Obito. But spiky hair is half the cast. Goofy villain persona? That's a stock mask for hiding any tragic backstory. Knowing Kakashi's habits could have pointed to Obito, or Rin, or some secret AMBU teammate Kishimoto hadn't even named yet. We need to be honest about how our brains work. We see the reveal. Then we march backwards through the story and circle everything that fits, and we quietly ignore everything that doesn't. This is not a sin. This is normal. This is how pattern-seeking monkeys end up seeing Jesus in toast and Obito confirmed in every panel where Toby trips over a rock. Except, listen to me, when you dig into author comments, the story gets messier. Kishimoto has admitted in interviews that certain twists evolved mid-run. Toby's identity, Madara's role, the exact chronology of Obito's survival and manipulation, these were not all perfectly locked in from chapter 1. He had broad ideas. Then he adjusted them as the story sprawled, as editors weighed in, as power creep went off the rails. So what actually happened on the page? Ambiguous design choices, mask, single eye, vague age. Ambiguous dialogue, references to that failure, to the past war, to things only an Uchiha would know. None of that required, this is Obito. It only required, this is someone from Kakashi's generation with Uchiha ties. When Kishimoto finally committed to Obito, he retrofitted the ambiguity. He took earlier fog and said, cool, now this fog is specifically Obito-shaped. That's not foreshadowing, that's retrofitting. The difference is intent at the time of writing. Foreshadowing is when the author already knows the answer and plants a seed that only grows one way. Refitting is when the author goes back to an old seed that could have grown into anything and decides much later what fruit it's going to be. Pattern interrupt. If Kishimoto can do that with a main villain's entire identity, what do you think fandom can do with one tattoo on Dragon's face? So no, we don't get to point at Dragon's tattoo, say, it kind of looks X, and declare Luffy's mum solved. If your theory works equally well for 3 different countries, 2 random clans and a cool aesthetic choice Oda doodled at 3 AM, that's Naruto-style retrofit worship. Not evidence, the bar has to be higher. And now that we've reset that bar, we can finally do the annoying disciplined thing. Track every concrete hint Oda has ever given about Luffy's mother, and see whether Dragon's ink actually lines up, or whether we're just seeing Obito in the mask again. So here's where I'm going to annoy the English majors. There isn't a clean academic term for what Oda is doing here. You can squint and call it foreshadowing, or you can throw around planning and outlining, but it never quite fits. So I'm just going to coin a new category and force you to roll with it. I'm calling it pre-writing. And listen to me, this is not the same thing as, oh, he had a vague idea. True writing in the way Oda operates is when the author builds the symbols, the clans, the visual language of the world long before the exact scene, chapter or speech where their payoff is nailed down. The emblem exists before the plot beat that explains it. The decision is made, the scheduling is flexible. You can see this all over One Piece if you stop being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time 2 swirls line up. Think about Wano. Those family crests were on kimonos, gates and banners years before we got the full Tokugawa cosplay lore dump. The Kozuki mark, the Shimatsuki emblem, all that iconography was just sitting there quietly insisting I mean something, long before Oda walked us through the PowerPoint. Same deal with the Will of D. Early on, it's not foreshadowing in the strict Chekhov sense. It's pre-writing. The initial mentions don't point to a specific twist Oda had to invent on the fly. They're the visible tip of a cultural and historical iceberg he'd already built into the setting Bidle. He knows what the D-Clan is, what it meant in the Void Century, what role it plays in the endgame. He just hasn't chosen which chapter gets the big lore drop yet. Background silhouettes are another textbook example. Those mysterious figures at Marineford, the shadowy Shichibukai reveals, even early Revolutionary Army shots where half the cast is a blob with hair that isn't maybe I'll make someone cool later. That's Oda parking pre-written characters on the board while he figures out the cleanest narrative on-ramp. Here's the thing. In pre-writing, Oda doesn't necessarily know this panel in chapter 732 will finally explain this crest. What he knows is the cultural weight. He knows this mark is a Wano vassal family, or this symbol belongs to a forgotten kingdom, or this hairstyle is tied to a specific sea. Then he seeds it everywhere that culture would logically touch. The story catches up when it's convenient. Which brings us to Dragon's tattoo. That thing is not random. It's a specific, non-generic shape on a very intentional placement that Oda has admitted he added late in Dragon's design process. That screams pre-writing. Not cool doodle at 3 AM, but this is a cultural emblem for a group we have not fully toured yet. We need to treat it the way we treat Wano crests or D initials, not the way we treat edgy 2000s arm tribals. So here's what I need you to do. This is not a sin. This is not overthinking. This is normal for how Oda builds his world. In the next sections, we're going to cross-reference that tattoo against Wano, heraldry, Goa and Grey Terminal iconography and Revolutionary Army aesthetics. And if Dragon's Ink keeps behaving like a pre-written emblem instead of a cool scar substitute, then we have to ask a much scarier question about who wore it first. Then we have to ask a much scarier question about who wore it first. Because listen to me, Oda has a parent playbook, runs the same emotional software over and over. And the Roger Ace line is the tutorial level for understanding what he's doing with Luffy's mum. If you don't get that pattern, you're going to keep treating her absence as a plot hole instead of what it actually is. A deliberate negative space the author is saving for the kill shot. Think about Roger and Ace. We barely see Roger as a dad. We get the execution, some laughs with Rayleigh, a few softer moments with Rouge, and that's it. The legendary father is mostly a rumour. The mother, she's a late-game reveal whose entire existence is retroactively weaponized. Rouge holds Ace in her body for 20 months to dodge the world government, dies off-screen, and only when Sengoku drops the Son of Gold Roger bomb at Marineford do all those scattered hints about Ace's hatred of his father snap into place. The bloodline isn't trivia. It's a loaded gun Oda has been pointing at the story for years. Here's the thing. Ace's parentage is not dumped in one exposition paragraph. It's teased in shards. Ace saying he hates his father, Garp being weirdly invested in this random Fire Fist kid, Sengoku's reveal on the scaffold. Each piece lands in a different arc, under a different emotional context, until Oda finally flips the card and you realize the foreshadowing was structural, not cosmetic. This is not a sin. This is not over-engineering. This is normal for how he handles parents. And notice how Roger exists in the narrative. He's almost never in direct, cozy flashbacks. He's in other people's war stories. Rayleigh's bar monologue, Whitebeard's grudging respect, Shanks's childhood memories. Roger is a presence made of absence. His physical body is gone, but his decisions are still bullying the plot decades later. That's the same category Luffy's mother is in right now. She's a structural absence that quietly dictates what Dragon, Garp, and even the world government's allowed to say on panel. I need you to clock the scale here. If Oda went that hard for Ace, who is in the grand scheme a beautiful freckled side character that the story can and does live without, what do you think he's doing for his main character's parents? Do you really think the man who pre-wrote Laboon and Brook's reunion just shrugged at Luffy's mum and went, she doesn't matter? The problem isn't that there's no plan. The problem is that the plan isn't for us yet. So when Oda says in SBS that Luffy's mother is already drawn, but not important to the adventure, that's not him saying she's irrelevant. That's him saying her payoff lives in a later thematic layer. We need to separate screen time from narrative weight. Rouge barely appears and still detonates Marineford in retrospect. Which is why Dragon's tattoo starts to look less like random ink and more like the Roger Rouge patterns scaled up. A clan mark, a homeland symbol, a cultural scar that will, in the late game, fuse Dragon's motives, the will of D, and the oppressed corners of the map, Goa, Grey Terminal, maybe even Wano-coded cultures, into one maternal reveal. And if that's true, then the next step is nasty, tracing where that mark could have originated and which already drawn woman has been carrying Luffy's ideology in her body the whole time. And once you realize that, you suddenly remember something uncomfortable. Oda has done this exact late parent nuke maneuver before, multiple times, with characters you already emotionally processed and shelved years ago. So we need to talk about Sanji. Early on, he is the most grounded Straw Hat. No secret bloodline, no mystical destiny, just the Baratie cook with a tragic childhood, a gentleman pervert, a guy whose entire identity is wrapped around feeding people and respecting Zeph. Then whole cake drops and Oda rips the floorboards up. Suddenly this random cook is a genetically modified Prince of Germa 66, a failed science experiment whose father Judge literally tried to erase his humanity. Here's the thing, that reveal is not just trivia. Judge and Sora are textbook Oda parent archetypes. Judge is the twisted utilitarian parent, the author's walking thesis statement about what happens when you treat children as tools. Sora is the quiet, noble counterforce, poisoning her own body to sabotage the experiments, dying to preserve a shred of Sanji's empathy. The Baratie flashback you thought you understood is now retroactively a story about a boy fleeing fascist eugenics. The ideology behind Sanji's kindness gets reframed in one arc. Now jump to Big Mom. For hundreds of chapters she reads as a cartoonish monster, a meme factory with a hunger gimmick and a screaming homie chorus. Then Oda waits until we are deep into Yonko territory to hit you with the Elbaf flashback. A lonely child warped by a culture that punished her size, a foster system that weaponized her, a Mother Carmel, an avatar of institutional exploitation who literally plans to sell Linlin's body to the world government. Suddenly, her Tea Party obsession, her broken family structure, her obsession with races and utopia are not just quirks, they are the mangled echo of a kid who never got a real home. The author withholds the parental context until he can reframe an entire Yonko's ideology in one go. That timing is intentional. That timing is planned. So listen to me. Structurally, these are the same move. Oda sits on the parent file until the exact chapter where revealing it will detonate the maximum amount of emotional and thematic shrapnel. Straw Hat Trauma? Yonko Worldview? He presses the same button. And if he is doing that for Sanji and Linlin, you really think he is not doing something at least as intricate for the mother of his main character? Oh, Oda said she is not important. She might be some random woman who died off screen. Cool. Authors also say, I just drew it because it looked cool, about a symbol they then spend 20 years cashing in. This is not a sin. This is normal. I need you to be consistent. If you accept that parents are delayed thematic payoffs everywhere else, you cannot suddenly shove Luffy's mother into the NPC category because it feels safer. The pattern is on the page. The only question is which already drawn woman is waiting to blow the story open when he finally pulls the pin. And that, unfortunately, is where Dragon's tattoo stops being a cool design and starts being a map. So when I tell you Oda basically confessed Luffy's mother is already drawn, I need you to actually hear the sentence and not the meme version the community invented for it. The relevant SBS goes, Oda gets asked about Luffy's parents, and he answers that Luffy's mother has already appeared in the story, then immediately undercuts it by saying he has no intention of spotlighting her because she's not important to Luffy's adventure. Already appeared. Not spotlighting. Not important to Luffy's adventure. Those are three different clauses, three different categories of information, and we need to stop mashing them into one fuzzy, shut up, she doesn't matter blob. Because here's the thing. Already drawn is a concrete production statement. That's not philosophy, that's logistics. He is telling you the design exists, the character is on the page, and he did that before he answered the question. Then, separately, he's saying, her emotional weight is not the engine of Luffy's motivation. This is not the tragic orphan template where the murdered mum's locket is fueling every power-up. That's the not important to his adventure part. It's not irrelevant to the story forever, stop asking. This is not a Naruto mom situation. Fans hear that and, because we are all pattern-seeking monkeys who see Jesus in toast, we either overcorrect into, she's a random villager, go touch grass, or we treat it as some kind of gospel-level denial that she can ever matter to the world building. This is not a sin, this is normal. Oda's tone in SBS is deliberately chaotic. He trolls, he dodges, he turns serious questions into dad jokes about underpants. If you treat every flippant answer as a legally binding spoiler policy, you're doing forensic analysis on stand-up comedy. Use it as a data point, not as a force field. The data point is, she exists, she's on panel, and her personal relationship to Luffy is not the main emotional through line of his journey. That still leaves an enormous amount of room for her to matter politically, historically, thematically. Roger wasn't important to Ace's adventure in a day-to-day sense either, until suddenly he was the linchpin of the entire war that killed him. Now zoom in on the phrase already appeared in the story, not us here. That pretty strongly rules out the off-screen corpse scenario. He's not talking about a gravestone, he's talking about a character drawing, facial design, silhouette, presence. That instantly narrows the field from any hypothetical woman who ever existed to somebody you have actually looked at on a page. And once you accept that Oda hides clans, bloodlines, and ideologies in body markings, Wano tattoos, Fishman sunbrands, even Sanji's eyebrow swirl, Dragon's very late added, very distinctive face tattoo stops being aesthetic and starts being evidence. So if she's already drawn, and Oda's favourite hard mode of foreshadowing is embedding world building into symbols on bodies, where's the funniest, cruelest, most intentional place to stash the clue to her identity? On the skin of the man who walked away from Fuchsia, who never once utters her name, who turned his own face into a walking sigil. On Dragon's tattoo. And once you accept that, you have to ask a much worse question. Whose mark is he actually wearing? Whose mark is he actually wearing? Before we answer that, we need to talk about the one old man who absolutely knows and absolutely refuses to open his mouth. Garp. Because Garp is not subtle. This is the guy who announces his presence by punching his grandson through a wall in front of the Marines and then bragging about it. He flexes his Hero of the Marines title every chance he gets. He tells Luffy about Dragon on Water 7 in the most chaotic family reveal imaginable. And yet, when it comes to Luffy's parents as a whole, he suddenly develops the emotional restraint of a brick wall. That contrast is the foreshadowing. Listen to me. Garp is loud about the safe part of Luffy's lineage and quiet about the dangerous part. He'll yell, "Your dad is the world's worst criminal" in a crowded dock. But he will not say, "Your mother is X from Y." He never names her to Luffy. Never to Ace. Never to the Marines on panel. For a man who treats personal boundaries as optional, that is not normal grandfather behaviour. That is an intentional gap in the storytelling. Think about his scenes with Ace. In Impel Down and Marineford, Garp talks about Roger, about how Ace carries the burden of the Pirate King's blood. He frames Ace's tragedy around his father's name. Mother? Total silence. This is not a sin, this is not bad writing, this is Oda putting a neon sign over an empty space and daring you to notice. The author is saying, there is a category of information Garp will not touch. Now fold in, Dadan. Garp doesn't just park one kid with her, he drops off both Ace and Luffy, the son of Roger and the son of Dragon, and tells this mountain bandit raise them to be strong Marines. That's not childcare, that's witness protection with extra punches. The usual reading is, Dragon is busy being a revolutionary, so Garp hid the boy. Sure, this is fine. But it doesn't explain the overkill. It makes a lot more sense if Garp is dealing with two bloodlines that are politically radioactive, and any open connection to their mother would turn Fuchsia into a massacre site. Here's the thing. Garp's evasiveness only makes sense if naming her would stack a second, even worse target on Luffy's back than Son of Dragon already does. If Dragon's tattoo is a clan or regional mark tied to a persecuted group, then saying her name doesn't just expose Luffy, it exposes everyone who shares that sigil. Suddenly Garp's silence isn't comedic forgetfulness, it's operational security. Pattern interrupt. Garp, the man who punched a celestial dragon's descendant in the face metaphorically for decades, is the one choosing caution. I need you to sit with how out of character that is. So when Garp stares at Luffy, clenches his jaw, and then changes the subject, that's not just a grumpy grandpa bit. That's the narrative telling you there is a mother whose identity intersects with Dragon's tattoo, with a hunted people, with a past so dangerous that even a Marine hero shuts up. And if the loudest man in the story is protecting that secret, we need to ask, who else is in on it, and who is he protecting her from? And who is he protecting her from? Now, hold that thought and jump with me to Sabaody, because Rayleigh basically answers that question and then refuses to let you hear it. Remember that scene in the bar? The crew is freaking out because this old man just casually says, I was the Pirate King's right hand. And then he goes very calmly, I could tell you about the Void Sentry. I could tell you about the Will of D. I could tell you about the One Piece. He literally offers the spoiler doc for the entire series. And then he doesn't. He pulls back, not because he doesn't know, but because, in his words, it would ruin your adventure. That line is doing double duty. In universe, he's protecting their journey. Out of universe, that is Oda standing up in the middle of the bar, grabbing the mic and telling the community, "I know everything. I've planned everything. You don't get to skip to the last page." Here's the thing. That scene is not just about lore. It's about a philosophy of storytelling. Rayleigh is the embodiment of the pre-writing argument. He's the character who proves the author already has the answers. And he's also the character who refuses to hand them over early. When he says he won't over-explain Roger or the D or Raftel, he is also not explaining Luffy's parents, Luffy's destiny, any of it. Same category, same boundary. Rayleigh specifically says he doesn't want to determine how they live from here on out. He will not define their path with information. I put that next to Oda in SBS saying Luffy's mother is already drawn, but she's not important to Luffy's adventure. That's not Oda saying she's irrelevant to the world. That's Oda saying, if I foreground her now, you start reading Luffy as the son of X, not as Luffy. He's refusing to overdetermine the protagonist. I need you to see how intentional that is. When we finally met Sanji's parents, his whole past got reframed. When we met Big Mom's parents, her entire horror show suddenly made tragic sense. Parents in this story are loaded guns. You do not hang them on the wall in Act 1 unless you are ready to fire them. So if Luffy's mother is holstered off panel, that is not a sin. This is normal for an author who knows exactly how dangerous that reveal is. And now the uncomfortable question. If Rayleigh knows the Void Sentry, knows the will of D, sailed with Roger, watched Garp, knows Dragon is a revolutionary, what are the odds he doesn't know who Luffy's mother is? 0. Negative. This man almost certainly knows who she is, where she's from, and why that matters. So when he chooses silence, that is coordinated silence, which means, listen to me, Oda has almost certainly already put on the page at least one other person who shares that knowledge. The story is quietly surrounding Luffy, with people who know more about his bloodline than he does. The only question is, have we already seen the one person who knows both Dragon's tattoo and the woman who inspired it? So if the story is already surrounding Luffy with people who know more than he does, we need to ask the boring, unsexy question that actually matters. Where were these people and when? Because Dragon doesn't exist in a vacuum. He exists on a map, on very specific nights, under very specific storms. Start with the fixed point everyone remembers, Roger's execution in Logtown. Dragon is there. Not rumoured, not headcanoned, actually on panel, standing in the square as the storm rolls in. The author goes out of his way to frame him against that lightning cloak billowing tattoo exposed. That's not a random cameo, that is an intentional timestamp. Roger dies, the Great Pirate Era begins, and Dragon is already moving in East Blue, already watching the system reset itself. Now run that forward to Fuchsia Village. By the time Luffy is a little kid, Garp has already entrusted him to Dodan. Garp doesn't stumble into a mountain bandit daycare. He arranges it. He pressures them. He keeps visiting. This is not a sin. This is not bad parenting. In narrative terms, this is in fact how most of Oda's parent figures operate. They outsource the childcare while they go wage their ideological war. The problem is, for that to happen, someone had to deliver the kid to Garp in the first place. Here's the thing. Babies don't mail themselves to vice admirals. For Luffy to end up in Dadan's shack, somebody coordinated that handoff. That somebody is either Dragon, Luffy's mother, or both, which instantly kills the abandonment narrative. This is planned protection. This is a deliberate attempt to park the future most dangerous bloodline in the one sea the world government chronically underestimates. So why is Dragon haunting East Blue during this entire window? Why Logtown Storm? Why Goa Kingdom's backyard? If his tattoo is encoding a homeland or clan from some persecuted region outside East Blue, then his presence there reads very differently. It stops being, he's just recruiting in the boonies and turns into, he is hiding something or someone in the boonies. Exile, witness protection. A long mission to keep a particular lineage off the world government's radar. I need you to notice how Oda treats that tattoo. He added it late in Dragon's design, then keeps putting it in your face during key East Blue moments, especially around storms and fires. The mark doesn't match any known Goa heraldry. It doesn't match marine iconography. It feels imported, foreign, a clan emblem stranded in a sea it doesn't belong to. which quietly supports the idea that Dragon is the outsider in Goa, not Garp, not Luffy. And then you remember Grey Terminal. The trash heap under Goa, the fire the nobles use to erase undesirables, the Night Dragon's ship appears in the smoke. Suddenly his ideology and that tattoo stop reading as abstract rebellion and start smelling like payback, not theoretical justice, vengeance. For a specific burned out people, a specific erased homeland, and potentially one woman the story has been refusing to name. Because once we zoom into Goa, track that fire and line it up with Dragon's mark, the question stops being, who is Luffy's mother, and turns into something much worse. What did Goa already do to her? So we go to the scene of the crime, the model kingdom the world government loves to parade around as proof the system works. On top you've got the pristine European postcard city, where the nobles drink wine and cosplay as human capital gains. Below that, Fuchsia Village, the cute rural buffer zone, and then pushed out beyond the walls so the tourists don't have to see it, you get Grey Terminal, a mountain of trash, smoke and people the nobles have literally thrown away. And when a world noble visit gets scheduled, what does this shining pillar of justice do? They decide to burn it, not clean it, not fix the poverty problem, incinerate the entire trash heap and everyone in it so the celestial dragon doesn't catch a whiff of their filth. That's not metaphor. That's not foreshadowing for some abstract theme. That is a government planning a mass cremation of the poor for PR. Now listen to me, because this is where Dragon walks in and the temperature of the story changes. He shows up at Grey Terminal, sees the flames, sees people running, choking, dying, and he doesn't give a revolutionary speech first. He moves. He orders his crew to save as many as they can, and then he drops that line about the world being rotten. Not unjust in some textbook way. Rotten, spoiled from the inside out. Here's the thing. That anger doesn't read academic. It doesn't feel like a man who read too many banned pamphlets and decided to start an army. It feels personal, targeted. The way he stares at Goa's walls, the way the panel lingers on his face. You get the sense he's not just seeing a random kingdom. He's seeing a pattern, maybe even a memory. Which is where we need to stop pretending this is only ideology. What if his hatred of Goa's class structure is wired to someone specific who came from that trash heap category? A woman from Grey Terminal or a similar persecuted group who got chewed up by this exact system. Suddenly Dragon isn't just the world's worst dad who forgot to pick his son up from daycare. He's the guy who already watched the state take everything once and decided never again. Pattern interrupt. Go back and actually look at Grey Terminal. The way Oda draws the scavenger camps, the makeshift markings on tents, the rough, almost tribal silhouettes in the crowd. Then jump forward to later arcs where we see marginalized tribes and cultures with their own body markings and symbols. Dragon's tattoo starts to feel less cool, edgy dad ink and more clan sign. A solidarity mark. A permanent, intentional reminder of a burned out people he's carrying on his skin. And then you drop Luffy into this. The future Pirate King grows up in a kingdom literally built on the ashes of the poor. His grandfather is a marine hero who works for the same world order that signed off on that fire. His father is the man trying to burn that order down. And his missing mother, very possibly someone who stood in Grey Terminal smoke, or in a village just like it, before the flames. I need you to see how insane that is from a writing perspective. This is not a sin. This is not some wild coincidence the community hallucinated because we're pattern-seeking monkeys who see Jesus in toast. Oda has a category for parents whose stories come late, but reframe everything. Roger and Rouge, Judge and Sora, even Big Mum's twisted childhood. Dragon's tattoo, Goa's fire, and those ash-covered silhouettes are Oda quietly filing Luffy's mother into that same category, already drawn, already burned, just waiting for the reveal. And once you accept that, another problem appears. If that tattoo is a clan mark, where's the rest of the clan? So if the clan is real and the mark is real, we need to talk about the one thing that didn't exist on Dragon's face when he first walked on stage, that tattoo. Go back to Logtown. Early Dragon is a trench coat, a heavy cloak, the vertical scar, and a storm machine aura. That's it. No huge jaw pattern. No cheek to forehead ink wrapping his eye. Oda gives you the silhouette, the scar, the mystery. But when the rain hits, when he grabs Smoker's jute, every close-up is clean skin. A tattoo is absent. Not hidden by angle. Not maybe the inking was unclear. It's just not there. Then much later, post-Alabasta, post-Revolutionary Army being a formal thing in the story, Dragon shows up again. Now he's not just that weird guy who saved Luffy once. He's the world's most wanted man, the revolutionary leader, the guy the world government fears more than Whitebeard. And suddenly the design updates. Massive, asymmetric tattoo carved across the left side of his face. That is not a subtle tweak. That is a category change in his visual identity. Here's the thing. Oda has told us over and over in SBS and interviews that he refines designs as roles solidify. He'll say, I hadn't decided that yet, or I added this later when I knew what they were. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how most long serial storytelling survives. But when he locks someone into the deep world building tier, he starts dropping heraldry on their bodies. Fishman slave marks, Sun Pirates brand, Wano clan crests on armor and kimonos, the Whitebeard symbol and its little no-cross tweak after the real-world issue. These aren't random doodles because the author was bored that week. They're intentional signals. Once you understand that, Dragon's late-game tattoo suddenly looks less like cool edgy dadding and more like a flag he finally decided to raise. And I need you to notice the timing. The Revolutionary Army goes from vague rumour to structured organisation. We start hearing about kingdoms burned, nobles toppled, global oppression as a systemic problem instead of background noise. Right when Dragon's ideology is clarified, his face gets branded with a giant, easily replicable symbol. That's planned. You don't hand the community a cosplay-ready sigil and expect us not to spiral into pattern-seeking monkey mode, seeing Jesus in every panel of tattooed toast. So no, I don't buy Oda just thought it looked cool as the explanation. Nose fans will zoom in, trace it, overlay it on maps, compare it to Wano crests and Skypiea wings. This is normal. This is fine. He feeds that impulse when he wants you to treat a design as data, which means the next step is obvious. We're going to dissect that tattoo the way Oda dissects a feast. Shape, placement, visual language. What does it rhyme with? Which seas, clans or regions in One Piece whisper the same pattern? And when it rhymes, who does that quietly dragging into frame as the woman who wore it first? Luffy's mother. So we need to stop treating Dragon's tattoo as cool, edgy dad ink and start treating it as a paragraph Oda wrote on his skin. Listen to me. This thing has grammar. It has flow, emphasis, and regional accent baked into the lines. First, basic shape. When you actually trace it, it's not a random zigzag. It's a sweeping curve that hooks across the left side of his face, then fractures into sharp spikes, then continues down his arm in a serpentine path. Curved spine, jagged ribs, tapering tail. The overall silhouette reads more serpent or dragon than lightning bolt, and the important part is that it never mirrors. It's asymmetrical on purpose. One continuous motion, starting at the brow, flowing past the eye, then wrapping down where the cloak can't fully hide it. That placement is doing storytelling. You don't put something on the left side of the face, crossing the eye line, and then extend it down the arm if you want it private. Compare that to Nico Robin's shoulder mark or Nami's Arlong tattoo. Those are tucked away, hidden under clothes, only revealed when the story demands it. Dragon's, by contrast, peeks out even when he is fully cloaked in Logtown. The author is telling you this mark is meant to be seen and recognized in universe. This is not a sin. This is not bad subtlety. This is the visual equivalent of shouting without using dialogue. Here's the thing. Once you put Dragon's ink in a lineup with other body markings, it starts quietly choosing a category. Fishman pirate tattoos tend to be bold, closed shapes with clear emblems and thick outlines. Wano crests are compact, symmetrical, crest-like, often built around circles and family kanji. Then you have the more tribal, open-ended designs on characters from less industrialized or oppressed regions. The sun marks on Shandians, the rough, jagged ink on minor revolutionaries, the scarified patterns on people who have been branded by history instead of fashion. Dragon's lines sit much closer to that last group. Thin, hand-drawn energy. Irregular spikes, almost claw-like protrusions, and these subtle wave motions in the curves that echo wind or smoke. When your pattern-seeking monkey brain that sees Jesus in toast calms down for 2 seconds and you actually compare panels, those curves rhyme harder with Wano's traditional wave patterns and the swirling motifs around samurai armor than with, say, a clean marine insignia. You also start noticing recurring shapes, spiral-adjacent bends that feel cousin to the Gomu Gomu Nika swirl aesthetic, clawed angles that echo dragon imagery, and that flowing, windish motion Oda always uses when he wants to show a force of nature more than a logo. Generalization. Specific example. It feels closer to a clan mark burned into a persecuted group than a cool tattoo a midlife revolutionary grabbed in a port town. So the conclusion here is simple, and it matters. The tattoo reads as a clan or tribal emblem, or at minimum an ideological banner, not a random design, which means it is a perfect vessel for encoded origin. And if Dragon is wearing someone else's mark on half his body, whose story is he actually carrying? In the next section, I need you to follow me into the one answer Oda has already admitted is drawn, but never named, the woman whose homeland that mark belongs to. And here's where Dragon's Ink stops being cool character design and starts being legal evidence. Because listen to me, Oda has a whole visual language carved into people's skin, and Dragon's tattoo is written in that same alphabet. Think about Arlong and Nami. That Saw Shark crew mark isn't just a logo, it's a branded ownership stamp. When Nami is forced to wear it, that's not fashion, that's slavery. Then Oda replaces it with the sun. At first, it's just a neat symbol. Later, suddenly, Fisher Tiger shows up. We learn about Mariejo, the branded hooves, and that same sun becomes a global sign of liberation. One mark, 2 eras of meaning, exact same drawing, completely different context once the author decides to flip the lights on. This is the pattern. These marks are almost never aesthetic. They're shorthand for allegiance, history, or shared trauma, and they're usually anchored to a region or an oppressed group. The sun is Fishman District and the former slaves. The Kozuki crest and the other Wano clan symbols are literally a political map you can wear on your back. Whitebeard's Jolly Roger isn't just a pirate flag, it's a found family surname. You see that mustache skull on Ace's back, on Oden's kimono, on random allied captains, and you instantly know who they die for. Here's the thing. Oda loves to hide world building in these marks first, then make you feel stupid years later when he reveals the meaning. The Fishman's Son is the cleanest example. Pages, it's just Arlong's crew thing. Then Fisher Tiger's flashback reframes it as an act of defiance. Overwrite the Celestial Dragon brand with a sun. Erase your chains with fire. The symbol was doing double duty the whole time. We just didn't have the key. And when you zoom out, major ideological figures always drag a visual motif behind them. Fisher Tiger spreads the sun. Whitebeard spreads his mustache skull. The Revolutionary Army. Repeated wing shapes, feathers, and harsh diagonals across flags, ships, and outfits, all orbiting Dragon's own design. That's not an accident, that's intentional branding in the literal sense. So when the most wanted revolutionary on the planet has a huge, unique tattoo covering half his face and arm, you really think that's in the cool swirl category? This is not a sin, by the way. This is normal shonen shorthand. But in Oda's storytelling, a mark that prominent on an ideological leader is either a clan emblem, the core banner of his movement, or both. And both of those options drag us right back to Luffy's mother. Because if Dragon's tattoo started as the symbol of his original people, and that symbol then became the Revolutionary Army's spine, the missing variable is simple. Whose homeland birthed that mark? Whose body wore it before Dragon ever picked up a needle? In the next section, we need to go find the one woman Oda has already drawn who fits that silhouette a little too well. So if Dragon's symbol started as someone's homeland mark, we need to ask a very unsexy, very technical question. What visual category does that mark actually belong to? Not cool anime tattoo as a genre, I mean inside One Piece's internal design language, where Oda is absurdly consistent when he's being intentional. Here's the thing. Wano already gave us a Rosetta Stone for this. Every major family in Wano has a crest. Kozuki with the stylized crane and sun, Kurozumi with the curling flame shapes, Shimatsuki with those sharp petal forms. They're all doing the same trick. Animal, plant, or simple geometry boiled down into repeating curves, spikes, and circles. Waves, fans, flowers. Identity encoded as a compact little logo. Now, look at Dragon's tattoo again. You've got that sweeping S-curve running down his face, then those branching spikes that flare out and taper. That is not random graffiti. That is crest geometry. Those spikes echo the jagged fan shapes on the Kurozumi emblem. The curve itself moves almost exactly the way the Kozuki crane wings arc around their central sun. It's not a one-to-one copy, but it's the same visual sentence structure. Listen to me. I am not saying Dragon is secretly a Wano samurai who got lost on the way to the flower capital. Calm down, pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Oda draws a spiral. What I am saying is that Oda has a very specific category of mark he uses when he wants to say, this is a cultural emblem, not a cool spur-of-the-moment tattoo the character got on spring break. Dragon's face is written in that alphabet, and it's not just Wano. Think about Skypiea and Shandia. Enel's priests, the Shandians, even the random Sky residents. They're covered in body paint and tattoos that mirror their cloud architecture and ancestral drums. Curved lines, hooked spikes, motifs that repeat on clothing, drums and skin. Go to Shandia? Same deal. Go to the less modernized islands across the Grand Line and you see the pattern. The more tribal the culture, the more the body itself becomes a flag. Meanwhile, industrial powers get uniforms and logos. Marines have that clean seagull emblem and standardized coats. World government agents get suits, sunglasses, and a simple cipher. Pirates get Jolly Rogers. Skulls, crossbones, goofy hats. None of those sit on the skin the way Dragon's tattoo does. They're banners you wear or fly, not lines carved into your identity. And Dragon's mark lives in the tribal/clan category, not the military logo category. It visually sits closer to a Shandian face pattern or a Wano crest fragment than to a marine coat or a straw hat Jolly Roger. That implies origin. Personal, possibly ancestral origin. And when you overlay that with Goa's class system, it gets nasty. The nobles of Goa are spotless, uniformed, crest-wearing in the European sense. Bray terminal is smoke, rags, improvised symbols on scrap. You do not see permanent proud clan marks on the nobles. You would expect them on the persecuted, the people shoved into the fire, a dragon walking around with a clan-style emblem burned into his face. That reads as a survivor's flag from a group the Goa elite tried to erase. A group that, given the timing of Luffy's birth and Dragon's sudden ideological break, almost certainly includes one woman. Which means the next step is brutal. We need to go hunt through Oda's already drawn women and find the one whose design quietly rhymes with that mark. But before we go full conspiracy board on Dragon's tattoo, we need to deal with the elephant in the fandom. The revolutionary women the community keeps speedrunning into Luffy's mum territory. I need you to breathe because most of these are not foreshadowing. They're red herrings with really good character design. Start with Ginny. On paper, she's perfect bait. She's in the revolutionary backstory. She's emotionally tied to Dragon's era. She's introduced right when Oda is deep in parents and bloodlines storytelling, and her tragedy hits right before the timeline window when Luffy would be born. So fans see woman plus Dragon's generation plus sad backstory, and our pattern-seeking monkey brain goes, ah yes, maternal foreshadowing. We've solved it. This is normal. This is fine. But look at how Oda actually frames her. Her emotional gravity is aimed at Kuma and Bonnie, not Dragon. A sacrifice resolves that family, that promise, that child. If she were secretly Luffy's mother, the author would be double-dipping the same tragedy across two bloodlines. And that's not how his planned parent reveals usually work. Compare that to Roger and Rouge, or Judge and Sora, or Big Mum's flashback. When a parent matters to a main character, Oda builds a resonance field around them. Visual parallels, inherited mannerisms, lines of dialogue that echo across generations. With Ginny, the silhouette, the expressions, the paneling, all rhyme with Bonnie, not Luffy. The category she belongs to is Bonnie's mother, revolutionary martyr, not hidden straw hat ancestor. Then there's Ivankov. Ivankov is fascinating because they are explicitly the one revolutionary who already knows the truth. They recognize Luffy's name. They know Dragon's identity. They casually drop, "So you're Dragon's son," in Impel Down, like they're commenting on the weather. But here's the thing. That's narrative positioning as a keeper of information, not as the information. Ivankov being Luffy's mother would be the storytelling equivalent of hiding the One Piece in the Bharati pantry. Too central, too loud, zero emotional setup. Instead, Oda uses Iva as a controlled leak. They prove that Dragon talks about his son, that Dragon's family is known in the inner circle, and that there is a deliberate off-panel history we're not allowed to see yet. You can stretch this to the other revolutionary adjacent women too. The Leloucia woman who recognizes Sabo's flag. Background commanders and agents we glimpse in crowd shots. They're great for world building. They show that Dragon's movement has ordinary citizens, mothers, daughters, widows, radicalized by the world government's cruelty. But when you test them against Oda's parent pattern, the foreshadowing weight just isn't there. No Luffy-shaped visual rhyme. No carefully staged reaction shots when his name is spoken. O'Reilly style, "I could tell you but I won't" beat. And so we need to be honest. Most of these are intentional misdirects or thematic mirrors, not the answer. This is not a sin. This is how an author protects a planned reveal. He surrounds the real clue with decoys. And the real clue, the one that actually carries clan-level significance, is not a named commander we've already met as Dragon's wife. It's encoded in Dragon's body itself. That tattoo is not cool rebel ink. It's a homeland, a clan, a burnt-out community stamped on his face. Which means, if we want Luffy's mother, we stop chasing job titles in the revolution and start tracing that mark back to the woman who wore it first. And if that mark started with a woman and a homeland, we need to ask the next question. Who actually knows that story and universe? Who has the lore, not the rumors? Because the answer to that quietly points straight to Ivankov. Go back to Impel Down. Ivankov doesn't meet Luffy as some random rookie. He clocks the straw hat, the attitude, the absurd pain tolerance, and then drops the bomb. "You're Dragon's son." That reaction isn't surface-level fanboying over the world's most wanted man. It's the horror of someone who knows Dragon as a person, knows the cost of his decisions, and is suddenly staring at the living consequence. That is not how you react to a trivia fact. That is how you react to a ghost. And Marineford doubles down. When Ivankov sees Luffy keep moving through poisoned organs, blood loss, and grief, there's this mix of shock and grim recognition. The Will of D isn't just a meme to Ivankov, it's a category. This is that thing again. Listen to me, that's foreshadowing by character behavior. Oda is telling you, this clown-coded revolutionary has read the Dragon backstory file. They know the clan, they know the stakes, and they know why Dragon left a baby in Garp's hands and vanished into history's blind spot. And if you know why Dragon abandoned his own son, you know who he abandoned that son with. You know the mother. You know whether she died, disappeared, or had to be erased on purpose. Ivankov is in the revolutionary inner circle from the early days, the pre-most wanted man era. That's the period where Dragon's tattoo, his ideology, and his family decisions all get forged together. You don't share a death penalty movement and not know the origin story. Here's the thing. Ivankov talks, constantly, about gender, bodies, secrets, rumors, Dragon's bad habits, Luffy's recklessness. This is not a discrete person, and yet across Impel Down and Marineford, through all the screaming and narration, there is exactly zero casual, "Oh, you got your eyes from your mother" moment. No throwaway gag. Nothing. For a character built to overshare, that silence is deafening. But you have to ask, why is that the one topic off limits? Why is the community's favourite gossip queen running a gag order on Dragon's wife? The most reasonable answer is that the author has made that identity politically radioactive in-universe. Not just sad backstory dangerous. Erasure level dangerous. The kind of dangerous where saying her clan name in a prison full of world government agents is a problem. Now plug Dragon's tattoo back in. If that mark is her clan's crest, or her kingdom's sun emblem, then Ivankov isn't just avoiding a private romance. They're avoiding naming a persecuted people the government tried to wipe out, the same way they buried O'Hara and the DNA. This is not a sin in writing terms. This is intentional narrative redaction. The tattoo becomes a visible daily refusal to forget a woman and a nation the world was ordered to forget. And Oda keeps everyone's mouth shut about her on panel because the reveal of that symbol, that name, and that history is being saved, which means we can't stop at Ivankov knows. We need to ask who else has brushed up against that erased emblem without realizing it. So if the tattoo is a redacted homeland and a redacted woman, listen to me, we can't keep her floating in theory space. We need to pin her to a calendar and a map, or she doesn't count. Timeline first. Roger is executed 22 years before Chapter 1. Luffy is 17 at the start, so his birth is roughly 6 years after Roger's death. Agonize is already an adult at Logtown, already infamous enough that Smoker recognizes him, which means his ideological heel turn into world's worst criminal is happening in that gap between Roger's execution and Luffy's childhood in Fuchsia. Here's the thing, we also know the Revolutionary Army wasn't born fully formed. By O'Hara's destruction 20 years ago, Dragon is shown watching the Buster Call aftermath, with Vegapunk in the anime version, and with that same grim energy in the manga. That puts him already travelling, already recruiting, already wearing that tattoo. So any theory about Luffy's mother has to fit into that window where Dragon is moving from disillusioned marine citizen to underground revolutionary. Oh, practical questions. If Luffy's mother was alive at his birth, where is she physically standing on the map? East Blue, near Fuchsia? Another blue entirely? A kingdom under active world government oppression? Because that geography changes the logistics of the Garp drop-off. Dragon doesn't just teleport a baby to Dawn Island and say, "Dad, good luck." He has to sail in, hand Luffy over, and sail out without getting his partner and their homeland obliterated Ace style. This is where Rouge becomes the control example. She hides Ace's pregnancy for 20 months because the father is the Pirate King, and the world government is hunting bloodlines as if genes have bounties. That's not a one-off melodrama. That is Oda showing you the procedure for child of a dangerous name. You vanish. Every single week. You lie. You erase paperwork. So if Dragon is already on the government's radar, a similar vanish to protect maneuver for Luffy's mother is not a stretch. This is normal. This is exactly how Oda handles high-risk lineage. Now add the tattoo constraint. If that mark is a clan or regional emblem, then Luffy's mother almost certainly comes from that culture. Dragon doesn't randomly appropriate a symbol from some faraway tribe because the author thought it looked cool. Oda has a pattern of body markings being ethnically or nationally grounded. Wano crests, fishman tattoos, Shandian wings, those are passports printed on skin. So Dragon's meeting with her has to happen in or around that homeland, before or during his early revolutionary phase, and early enough for a pregnancy, a birth, and then a disappearance before Fuchsia Luffy. You see the filter forming. Any candidate, Ginny, some random Goa woman, a celestial dragon runaway, has to survive this brutal combination of age math, travel time, Revolutionary Army growth, and the tattoo's implied origin. If they don't line up with Dragon's ideological turn and his documented movements, they're not foreshadowing, they're fan fiction. And here's where it gets uncomfortable, because when you actually run that filter, one very specific category of woman survives, and Oda has already drawn her. And if you're sitting there going, what category of woman? Listen to me. Oda already showed you the template with Portgas de Rouge. Rouge is the control group. She's the lab experiment that tells you how this author handles a politically radioactive birth. Actually, she doesn't just carry Ace. She weaponizes her own body as counter-surveillance. 16 months of pregnancy, extending it purely to hide his existence from the world government, and then she dies the second she lets go. That entire horror story is hidden from you until after Ace is dead, so when Garp finally explains it, the emotional payload detonates retroactively. That's not random tragedy. That's planned structure. The mother's sacrifice is backfilled to reframe the son. Roger and Rouge create a child whose existence is a war crime. The Pirate King's blood, the Will of D, the Son of the Devil, the Marines are literally hunting in the delivery room. So what happens? Garp is forced into the role of secret guardian. He hides Ace's name. He hides Ace's parentage. He raises him off the grid in the East Blue. Sound familiar yet, or do I need to draw the Garp Dragon Luffy family tree in crayon for us as a community? Here's the thing. Structurally, Luffy is Ace 2.0. Different temperament, different destiny, same narrative category. Child whose birth equals political dynamite. Handed to Garp, raised in Fuchsia Village with a fake level of normalcy, while the world government would absolutely lose its mind if they had the full file. So when fans say, maybe Oda hasn't really thought about Luffy's mom, I need you to hear how wild that sounds in the context of Rouge. This author clearly enjoys the pattern of a mother bearing the entire burden in secret, then being erased from the child's day-to-day life for their protection. All that's left is a name, a will, a symbol. The storytelling is ruthless and intentional. The mom is not a character, she's a fault line. Now, parallel doesn't mean copy-paste. Oda doesn't just reskin Rouge with green hair and call it a day. If Luffy's mother followed the same structural pattern, the threat around her has to escalate. Not only is she the partner of the world's most wanted revolutionary, she's also tied to a persecuted clan or kingdom. That's where Dragon's tattoo walks on stage. Pattern interrupt. What if that isn't Dragon's mark at all? What if that jagged, storm-shaped tattoo is her people's crest? The emblem of a wiped-out island, a burned banner, a culture the world government erased the way they tried to erase Ohara. Suddenly, Dragon isn't just a guy with cool ink. He's wearing a memorial. He's turning her clan's symbol into the Revolutionary Army's visual thesis statement. In that frame, the tattoo does double duty. It's a gravestone for Luffy's mother and a flag for her nation. It's the one visible link between a hidden maternal storyline and Luffy's very public adventure, sitting on the face of the man the camera's always cut away from. And if that's true, then every time you see that tattoo, you're already looking at Luffy's mother's legacy. You just didn't know the category you were seeing yet. So here's the thing. If that tattoo is already functioning as a gravestone and a flag, then we need to push the theory one step further and actually name what it is. I'm not talking metaphorically, I'm talking in-universe category. The hypothesis is this. Dragon's tattoo is not a cool personal logo he sketched in the mirror one day. It is a crest, a clan or tribal mark, specifically the symbol of Luffy's mother's people, a group that was chewed up and spat out by the world government long before you ever saw a straw hat on panel. Dragon isn't just wearing trauma, he's wearing a family name. For that to be anything more than me being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast, it has to clear some criteria. It has to visually rhyme with other clan or nation symbols in one piece. It has to fit Oda's established habit of putting group identity into skin and scars. And it has to make sense with Dragon's entire ideological arc. If any of those three fail, the whole thing collapses. Start with the visuals. Oda draws family and faction marks with a specific logic. Bold, simple shapes that can be repeated on flags, skin, and architecture. The Kozuki crest, the Don Quixote smile, the sun tattoo of the fisherman's slaves. Dragon's cheek mark sits in that same design language. Heavy line work, easily stencible, asymmetrical but iconic. That's clan branding, not a spontaneous midlife crisis tattoo. Second, Oda's use of the body. Foreshadowing in One Piece lives on skin. The slave hoof turns into the Sun Pirates' rebellion. Sanji's eyebrows telegraph Germa's science. Ace's ASCE tattoo quietly encodes Sabo. This is not a sin, this is not random, this is intentional writing. When the author slaps a huge, unique mark on the most wanted man in the world and never explains it for 25 years, that's not decoration, that's a locked file. Now plug Dragon's ideology into this. The standard fan story is, he saw the Go of Fire, he saw nobles being trash, he radicalized. But listen to me. People do not build a global revolutionary network because their hometown was mid. They do that because something personal and irreversible happened. If Dragon married into, or was taken in by, a persecuted clan, Luffy's mother's clan, and watched the government erase them, then the tattoo stops being fashion and becomes oath. He isn't rebelling in the abstract, he's avenging a specific people. And this, I would argue, is where Oda's already drawn comment suddenly stops being cute and starts being loaded. If Luffy's mother is from a wiped-out tribe, Oda can absolutely have drawn her people already. In a flashback crowd, in a silhouetted execution, he can even have drawn her younger self. The community just doesn't know which face to circle yet, because the crest that would connect her to Dragon has not been explained. Rayleigh refusing to spill details about Luffy's parents, Garp dodging every question, Dragon never mentioning his partner on panel. This is fine. This is normal for Oda when he's sitting on a delayed family reveal. He did it with Sanji's parents. He did it with Big Mom's childhood. The pattern is consistent. You meet the consequences first, the bloodline second. So here's what I need you to do in the next sections. We're going to stress test this clan crest hypothesis against the actual map of One Piece. Goa slums, off-screen kingdoms that mysteriously vanished, islands that share visual motifs with Dragon's mark. We're going to go region by region and ask, where does this tattoo fit so well it stops being theory and starts being evidence? And when you start mapping that tattoo onto the world, you hit Fuchsia Village way faster than you'd expect. Because Fuchsia isn't just cozy starter town with a fun bar mom. It's a dead-end cul-de-sac of the East Blue, a nowhere speck hanging off the Goa Kingdom's edge, as far from Mariojo and the Grand Line chessboard as you can reasonably punt a newborn. Is the thing. If you're an author who has already planned that your protagonist is the son of the world's most wanted revolutionary and a woman from a persecuted clan, where do you put that kid? You do not raise him in Logtown, where every Marine intern is cosplaying Smoker of Justice. You tuck him in a port where even the nobles forget the name. Fuchsia is a geographic witness protection program with better booze. And then Garp strolls in and jokingly dumps Luffy on Dadan. This is where the community usually goes, haha, funny abusive grandpa gag. No, listen to me. Garp is a vice admiral who could have filed one form and had Luffy raised in a secure marine facility, or handed him to some loyal middle-class family under government supervision. Instead, he hands the most politically radioactive child on Earth to a mountain bandit who literally lives off the grid. That's not random. That's planned. Bandits don't do paperwork. Bandits don't get census visits. Dadan's hideout is physically above Goa's class system, outside the gates above the fire line when the nobles torch Grey Terminal. When the kingdom tries to erase its own poor, the criminal foster home of the future Pirate King is the safest place on the island. Convenient? Sure. Coincidental? I need you to stop being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Oda draws a swirl. But this one is too clean. Sure, coincidental? I need you to stop being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Oda draws a swirl. But this one is too clean. Now fold in the persecuted clan angle. If Luffy's mother comes from a bloodline that both the world government and its enemies want dead, where do you hide her child? Not under marine surveillance, where one bored clerk can notice a birth record that doesn't add up. You stick him in a low-profile village, under a criminal caretaker whose whole business model is don't tell the government anything. Dadan, being terrified of Garp, is the perfect leash. She keeps Luffy hidden because she's scared, not because she understands the stakes. And notice what nobody in Fuchsia ever talks about. In a tiny port town, gossip is currency. People know who drank too much last week, who's cheating, who's pregnant. Yet in 10 years of flashbacks, no one once goes, "So, where's your mum, kid?" That silence is loud. That's not irrelevant to the adventure. That's an intentional narrative blackout around one topic, maternal origin. Tie it back to Dragon's tattoo and it gets nastier. If that mark is a clan crest, something any half-informed cypherpole agent or old enemy could recognize on sight, then Dragon cannot be near Luffy without painting a target on him. So the strategy becomes brutally simple. Dragon keeps the crest. Luffy stays unmarked and buried in Fuchsia, under a bandit's roof. Father and son are separated not because Oda forgot moms and dads exist, but because the visual proof of Luffy's lineage is sitting on Dragon's face. Which means the real question isn't where was Luffy's mother. It's who in Goa knew enough to help hide her son. And that trail leads us straight into the Goa Kingdom's fire, the nobles' purge, and the one missing woman who should have been there when everything burned. So we walk into the Goa Kingdom fire, and suddenly Dragon isn't just mysterious dad with a cool cloak anymore. He's a guy who watched a kingdom cleanse its own paw off the map and then decided permanently, yeah, this entire world order has to go. And that hits different when you remember he's Garp's son. Dragon should have been a Marine. That's the default script. Raised under a hero of the Marines, steeped in justice, trained to see pirates as the problem. The author doesn't give you that setup for free. That's intentional contrast. Because what does Dragon do with that inheritance? He rejects it so hard he becomes the single most wanted man on the planet. Not a rogue officer, not a disillusioned vice admiral. The antithesis of the system his father serves. So we need to ask, what breaks a person that far? Abstract injustice is bad, sure. The world is unfair is a decent starter pack for rebellion. But that alone usually gives you a grumpy smoker in a trench coat, not the architect of a global revolution. Here's the thing. Dragon doesn't move like a generic revolutionary archetype. He moves like someone whose specific people were erased. Look at his targets. He shows up at Grey Terminal, not Mariawazi. He focuses on oppressed kingdoms, rigid class stratification, nobles treating entire populations as trash to be burned. Over and over, the storytelling points him toward places where one group is systematically crushed by another. That pattern is foreshadowing. It's the author quietly whispering, this isn't just politics for him, this is personal. I'll plug Luffy's mother into that. I need you to picture a small clan or an island kingdom with a distinct culture, a distinct mark. Maybe that swirling pattern on Dragon's face wasn't originally his at all. Maybe it was theirs. A tribal emblem, a family sigil, a symbol worn by a people the world government decided were inconvenient. You don't have to stretch to see the example. O'Hara's scholars, Skypia's Shandians, the way Wano's Kozuki crest carries 800 years of defiance. Oda loves turning markings into history. Imagine Dragon meets this woman from a persecuted lineage, falls in with her people, watches them get gored by nobles or Buster called off the map while his own father wears a marine cap. That's not a policy disagreement. That's a personal tragedy. And in the aftermath, he takes their mark and carves it into his own skin. The tattoo stops being random cool ink and becomes a vow. I will carry you into every battle. I will make your extinction the thesis of my ideology. And now his distance from Luffy stops being bad dad writing and becomes survival strategy. If Dragon, bearing the emblem of a hated, erased clan, openly claims a son, that child becomes the living nexus of two threats, the will of D and that obliterated bloodline. You don't just get a bounty, you get a target painted by history itself. So he vanishes. He lets Garp deliver Luffy to a backwater. He never mentions the mother on panel, because saying her name is pulling a pin, which raises the real problem. If Dragon is wearing her people on his face, where in the story have we already seen that symbol and just not realized it yet? So before we go hunting for that symbol, we need to take out the trash. And by trash, I mean the pile of Luffy's mom confirmed her post the community has been recycling for a decade. I need you to be honest with yourself here. You have at some point entertained at least one of these. Crocodile, Makino, Rouge, miraculously surviving. Random East Blue background lady number 4. These didn't come from nowhere. Crocodile got traction because of the Ivankov gag and the secret weakness, plus the sheer shock value of what if Luffy's mum is a gender-bent warlord. Makino is the cozy hometown option. She holds baby Luffy. She's close to Garp. She's literally framed as the village's nurturing figure. Rouge hangs on because fans are romantics and hate letting dead mums stay dead. And the background women are the purest form of pattern-seeking monkey brain. Oda said she's already drawn, so it has to be someone in this collage of panels. Here's the thing. When you run these through the foreshadowing retrofitting pre-writing framework, they collapse instantly. Crocodile has zero intentional parental foreshadowing. No mirrored scars with Luffy, no inherited habits, no structural setup where his past is framed as a missing puzzle piece in Luffy's origin. The Croc's mum theory is 95% retrofitting a joke power and a cloak silhouette into a family tree. This is not a sin. This is normal fan behavior. It's just not evidence. Makino? Same problem, different category. She has proximity, not payoff. Oda never codes her with the kind of heavy narrative weight he gives actual parents. No pointed paneling when Dragon appears. No meaningful reaction when Luffy's lineage is revealed. No Rayleigh-style, I won't pry into that around her. If she were the mother in a pre-written plan, the author would have planted at least one unmistakable structural flag. He doesn't. Rouge surviving Ace's birth and then somehow also birthing Luffy is where timeline and geography just laugh you out of the room. She dies in Batarilla shortly after Ace is born. Luffy is born years later, across the sea, tied into Goa and Fuchsia. To make Rouge work, you need off-screen miracles, secret voyages, and Dragon doing a whole soap opera baby swap that the story never even hints at. It's not foreshadowing. That's fan fiction patching holes, and the random background woman approach is the purest misread of Oda's already drawn clue. Fans treat that line as a license to point at any woman on any page and shout, "Candidate." But already drawn in a pre-writing context doesn't just mean she exists visually. It means she's slotted into the planned structure, thematically, symbolically, and historically. Most of these women are set dressing. They don't connect to Dragon, to the Will of D, or to any ongoing mystery. Listen to me. When you actually demand the same standard of intentionality we're about to apply to Dragon's tattoo and the clan hypothesis, clear structural setup, feasible timeline, symbolic alignment, these meme candidates crumble. And that's good. We need to clear out the noise, or we'll keep seeing Jesus in toast instead of looking at the actual mural on the wall, which sets up the real question. If most already drawn pics fail the test, who's left standing once you follow the ink on Dragon's face back to its source? So before we sprint off screaming Dragon's tattoo is the maternal roadmap, we need to talk about your brain and mine. Because under all the manga panels and SBS quotes, we are still the same pattern-seeking monkeys that see Jesus in toast and NL's face in every random cloud formation. Here's the thing. Your brain is wired to treat noise as signal. Faces in the moon, messages in Spotify Shuffle. Ancient clan emblems in a swirl Oda probably drew at 3 a.m. because the page looked empty. This is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal. Evolutionarily, it was better to overreact to the rustle in the bushes than underreact to the tiger. In fandom, that same hardware turns into every spiral is the will of D confirmed. And once you get attached to a theory, confirmation bias walks in, puts its feet on the table, and starts smoking your sanity. You decide this woman is Luffy's mom. And suddenly you only remember the panels where she's framed kindly, where the lighting feels soft, where someone mentions the past. The contradictions, the timelines, the author comments that quietly shoot it in the head, those get memory hold because they do not serve the story you want to tell yourself. You see this all over the community. Every single week, someone spots a random scar and declares it a secret clan mark, a lost D branch, a foreshadowing of some ancient kingdom. Every swirl on a cloak becomes Nika symbolism. Every older woman who smiles at a protagonist is secretly their missing parent, their mentor's ex, or both. I need you to admit you have done this at least once. I have. I am absolutely the clown who screenshots a background grandma and writes a 15006 word essay on her tragic backstory. But the problem is when we stop there and call it evidence. That's not evidence, that's vibes with citations. So I need you to hear this clearly. This video is trying very hard not to do that. The Dragon Luffy's mom theory I'm building is not, the tattoo looks cool so therefore clan. It has to survive contact with the actual timeline, with Oda's stated habits, with his visual design language, with how he structures parent reveals in general. If it fails any of those, it goes in the trash, even if the aesthetic is perfect. So as we move toward the boldest claims, the ones where Dragon's tattoo stops being random ink and starts pointing to a specific homeland and a specific woman, I need you to fight me in your head. Actively look for disconfirming evidence. Does this clash with Rayleigh refusing to talk about Luffy's parents, with Garp's evasiveness, with Oda saying Luffy's mother is already drawn but not important to the adventure? If you just nod along because it feels cool, we have learned nothing. Because once we put the tattoo under that microscope, something unnerving happens. The noise doesn't go away. It gets sharper. And the question becomes, are we still seeing Jesus in toast? Or are we finally looking at the mural Oda painted across Dragon's face? But listen to me, because this is where the Jesus in toast problem either dies or evolves. If Dragon's tattoo is just random edgy ink, the theory collapses here. But if Oda is doing what he always does, then that noise you're seeing on Dragon's face is the same visual language he used to burn an entire class of people out of Goa. Go back to the Grey Terminal fire. Really go back. Look at those panels of the junk mountain going up in flames. The fire isn't neat. It's not soft curves. It's jagged, clawed tongues of black and white stabbing upward. The smoke whips in these sharp, hooked arcs that almost look intentional, planned, like the author was drawing a pattern, not just chaos. Bodies silhouetted against serrated flame, the air itself turning into teeth. Now put Dragon's profile next to that. I need you to actually imagine those 2 pages side by side. His tattoo isn't a cute dragon sticker. It's a series of hooked spikes and curling lines that wrap around his eye, then knife down his cheek. It reads as a dragon, sure, but it also reads as stylized flame or smoke being ripped by wind. The same clawed shapes you just saw devouring Grey Terminal are now frozen on his skin. The thing. Oda loves double duty symbols. The sun tattoo on the freed slaves is both a literal sun and a cover-up of a brand, a mark of trauma and freedom at the same time. Kinemon's dragon gag is both a joke and a foreshadowing of Wano's scar. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is how he compresses history into design. A tattoo is never just cool. It's a whole category of storytelling for him. So when you see Dragon's dragon made out of the same aggressive curves and spikes he uses for fire and smoke, the simplest read is that it's not just a dragon. It's a burn. It's a memorial. It's a map of a specific purge carved onto his face, potentially the purge of the very people Luffy's mother came from. His body turns into a walking cenotaph and a revolutionary banner at the same time. Suddenly, all those panels of dragon emerging from smoke, from storms, from roiling clouds, stop being random cool guy entrances. This is fine when you see it once. This is normal for a mysterious dad. But when every major dragon appearance has him framed by the same elements that erased Grey Terminal, you have to ask, is the author quietly tying this man, visually and thematically, to a burning we haven't fully seen yet? And if that burning wasn't random, if it was targeted at one clan, one island, one woman's homeland, then the tattoo stops being a clue about Dragon. It becomes the only honest record of what happened to Luffy's mother, which raises a much nastier question. If Dragon is wearing the crime on his skin, who is he accusing? Or if the tattoo is an accusation, we need to ask, who is on trial here? Not just a person, a place, a whole erased address in the One Piece world. Here's the thing. Dragon's mark is not random cool guy ink. It's tribal. It's asymmetrical, curved, almost serpentine, with that smoke and fire energy curling over his face. It's not a scar he's hiding. It's on his cheek, front and center, which in visual storytelling means pride, not shame. You don't put the brand of your enemy on your face. You put your clan, your cause, or your dead there. Add the dragon motif the community has already obsessed over. Fire, smoke, storm clouds, the way Oda ties dragons to burning skies and divine punishment. That design is screaming. Persecuted bloodline, hunted symbol, marginalized group. It's the category of mark you give to people the world government would absolutely call dangerous before they call them human. So where does that point on the map? I need you to notice how often Oda name drops places that never get a full tour. The destroyed O'Hara, the erased Lulusia, random kingdoms in reverie crowd shots. Islands mentioned once in an SBS, then never visited. That is not noise. That is pre-writing shrapnel. We can cross out the big tourist traps. It's almost certainly not Wano or Alabasta or Dressrosa. Those are already fully litigated thematically. Their clans, their symbols, their tragedies are on the table. If Dragon's tattoo was from one of those, Oda would have paid it off already, because that's how his foreshadowing rhythm works. Seed, arc, flashback, closure. Dragon is still in the seed phase. So we're looking for an underexplored culture with a tribal visual language associated with fire or sky punishment that has been oppressed or outright deleted by the government. O'Hara gives us the erased island template. Lucia gives us the instant smiting from above visual. But those are scholars and civilians. Dragon's mark feels more warrior clan than academic coat of arms, which suggests a homeland we have only seen in fragments. Background murals, nameless refugees, that revolutionary woman from Lucia, scattered through panels as proof that this culture existed before it was stomped out. This is not a sin in writing. This is normal for an author who's pre-written the end game and is drip-feeding context. Now, why does this matter for Dragon's ideology? Because if that homeland was targeted, burned, Buster called, or immu-beamed, and if the people who wore that mark were branded as heretics, you suddenly don't need a convoluted reason for Dragon to turn on the system. You have the cleanest, most intentional motivation in the story. They killed my partner's people. Listen to me. If Luffy's mother is from that clan, then Dragon's tattoo is not his origin story, it's hers. Her island burns, she dies or has to vanish, their child is smuggled out to Fuchsia, and Dragon walks into the revolutionary role, already carrying a corpse on his face. And once you realize that, the problem space shrinks fast. Because now we're not asking who is Luffy's mum in the abstract, we're asking which already drawn woman fits that clan, that trauma, and was close enough to Dragon to put that mark on his skin and that blood in his son. Which, unfortunately for our sanity, is where the foreshadowing starts pointing at actual names. So if the problem space shrinks, the next question is obvious. Where did Oda actually hide her? Because if he told us in SBS that she's already drawn, that is not a philosophical riddle. That is an address. That is the author quietly saying, go back and look at the panels you skimmed. Here's the thing. When you start doing that, patterns jump out fast. We need to hit 3 zones. First, the Goa flashbacks around Fuchsia and the Grey Terminal fire. Second, revolutionary gatherings where Dragon's inner circle shows up. Third, those big world event reaction spreads where Oda loves to stash future problems in one silent panel. Oda keeps cutting around the fire. The nobles, the trash heap, and you get these crowd shots with women who do not need to be that distinct. Sharp jawlines, slightly messy black hair pulled back, that same defiant even in misery expression you see on Luffy when he's about to punch a celestial dragon. There's one woman in particular during the evacuation chaos, framed behind a soldier, who has Dragon's eye shape, no name, no dialogue, just the community usually scrolls past her to argue about Blue Jam's hat. Then you go to the Revolutionary Army. Baltigo, Kamabaka, those brief glimpses of strategy rooms. Oda gives us background women who share the implied clan aesthetic from Dragon's tattoo. Swirling patterns on cloth, spiral earrings that echo the curve of that mark, geometric sashes that read more tribal than standard revolutionary uniform. You get this sense that Dragon didn't invent that tattoo, he inherited it. And suddenly that one woman who keeps reappearing near the map tables, always at the edge of the panel, starts to feel intentional instead of random. I need you to remember how Oda handles parents. Roger is a silhouette and a hat in Ace's childhood before he's a legend in a flashback. Sanji's brothers are faceless shadows long before Germa gets an arc. This is not a sin. This is normal for his storytelling. He plants the silhouette, the clothing motif, the recurring placement, and only later hands you the name tag. So no, we probably cannot circle one woman and declare this is Luffy's mom, stamp it and go home. Without future canon, that's pattern-seeking monkey seeing Jesus in toast territory. But we can narrow it to a small cluster who fit the Tattoo Clan hypothesis, the timeline and the narrative weight. Women present at Goa's disaster, women consistently orbiting Dragon during revolutionary scenes, women who visually rhyme with Luffy and with that mark on Dragon's face. Listen to me. The point is not face guessing. The point is realizing that Oda has almost certainly already shown us the culture she comes from. Maybe even her, and Dragon's tattoo is the Rosetta Stone that ties those silent panels back to Luffy. And once you accept that, you can stop asking where is she and start asking the better question, what was her people's role in the world Oda's been foreshadowing since chapter 1? And here's where we need to talk about narrative debt. Once you ink that giant, asymmetrical, mystery tattoo on the most wanted man in the world, you've opened a tab with the reader. You owe us. You don't get to shrug and go, cool design. Not in a series where every weird mark on a body has eventually come with a lore dump, an emotional breakdown, or both. This is the part the community constantly undersells. A symbol in One Piece is not neutral decoration. It's an IOU. It's the author writing a check with visual ink that future chapters have to cash. And Dragon's tattoo is a massive check. Think about the precedent. The sun tattoo on the slaves and on Fisher Tiger's crew starts as this ominous, unexplained emblem, just a shape. Then we get the Fishman Island flashback, and suddenly that shape is a thesis statement about slavery, rebellion, and inherited trauma. Same with the Wano crests. Early on, they're just pretty heraldry. By the time we hit Oden's flashback, every crest is a political affiliation, a death sentence, a promise. Even the single letter D answers a weird naming quirk and turns into a generational curse that the story keeps circling back to. None of those were throwaway. All of them were narrative debt Oda chose to pay, with interest. That's the foreshadowing pattern. So listen to me. Dragon's tattoo is sitting in that exact category. It's too big, too unique, and too isolated on his design to be forever meaningless, especially now. We are in the final saga. Oda is speedrunning his backlog of mysteries. Ancient weapons, being cached, Void Century, actively unraveling. Will of D, getting spelled out by ancient robots. You really think he's going to roll credits with, oh yeah, Dragon just found a cool stencil one day? Here's the thing. Once you accept that the tattoo must be explained, the question shifts from, will it matter, to what can it efficiently solve? Because Oda does not waste late-game reveals on single-issue trivia. He stacks functions. One flashback answers 5 questions. One symbol bridges 3 plot lines. This is not a sin. This is not overreading. This is literally how his writing has worked for 25 years. Tying that tattoo to Luffy's maternal clan is the most efficient move on the board. In one reveal, he can finally show Dragon's true origin, pay off the already drawn mother comment, and fold in another oppressed culture that explains Dragon's ideology. The ink stops being random and becomes a clan mark, a birthright, the visual proof that Dragon married into, or was saved by, a persecuted people whose fate mirrors the Void Century victims. Suddenly, the tattoo isn't just Dragon's cool face thing. It's the last breadcrumb of a woman Oda has deliberately kept off screen, because her story is structurally tied to the world's deepest wound. And from a craft perspective, that's elegant. That's Oda compressing 3 dangling debts, Dragon's past, Luffy's mother, and the history of the oppressed, into one clean payoff. And if you think that's me being a pattern-seeking monkey seeing Jesus in Dragon's cheekbone, I need you to hold that skepticism, because next we're going to line this tattoo up against Oda's actual parent reveal playbook and see if it still holds. And here's where we need to be really careful about what story we think Oda is actually writing. Because if you go full corkboard conspiracy on Dragon's tattoo and Luffy's mum, you end up in a very specific danger zone, turning One Piece into the thing Oda has been aggressively dodging for 25 years. The tragic destiny bloodline epic. The my parents were slaughtered, so now I must. Narrative. The exact category he keeps mocking in SBS answers while he smiles and draws a guy whose life goal is meat. Listen to me. Oda has been absurdly consistent about Luffy's motivation. Freedom, adventure, protecting his friends. That's it. No revenge arc. No restore the clan subplot. No secret royal obligation. When he finally gives us snippets of Roger's family, or Sanji's, or even Big Mom's nightmare childhood, notice the pattern. Those backstories explain the world, the politics, the systems of abuse. They do not retroactively overwrite why those characters move the way they move in the present. So when Oda says in SBS that Luffy's mother is already drawn but not important to Luffy's adventure, he's being very precise. Not important to Luffy's adventure. That's a scope limitation, not a denial of existence. The author is drawing a bright line between what motivates his protagonist and what scaffolds the setting around that protagonist. Here's the thing. Keeping Luffy's mother off screen is the cleanest way to preserve that line. If she walks into the story too early, everything tilts. Suddenly Luffy's not just chasing the One Piece because he thinks it sounds fun. He's chasing closure, or justice, or Mom's unfinished dream. Every scene with Dragon becomes a therapy session. The energy changes. The story stops being this idiot rubber boy crashed into history and becomes history has been grooming this boy since birth. Oda quarantines her. He lets her matter to Dragon. The clan's persecution can radicalize him. Her homeland can be tied to the Void Century, to why the world government fears certain symbols enough to burn entire islands. Her blood can literally run in Luffy's veins without ever sitting in the driver's seat of his personality. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is in fact how you keep a character's core clean while still threading them into a huge political tapestry. And that's why Dragon's tattoo is such a perfect tool. On the surface, it's just cool ink. For the community that wants to dig, it's an intentional flag. This man belongs to a specific persecuted group, which in turn explains his ideology in his absence. It's foreshadowing aimed at the world building, not at Luffy's future trauma. So when Oda shrugs and says, she's not important, he's talking in that narrow protagonist motivation category. Meanwhile, he's seeding tattoos, evasive Garp panels, Rayleigh refusing to pray into family, all for the readers who care about the larger machine humming under the Straw Hat's feet. Which means when she finally does step out of the shadows, she shouldn't, and I would argue cannot, rewrite who Luffy is. She should reframe Dragon. She should reframe the revolutionaries. She should make the world government's paranoia suddenly make disgusting sense. And if that sounds abstract, I need you to stay with me, because once we stack her against Oda's actual parent reveal playbook, the timing of her entrance, and the exact way she can appear without breaking Luffy, gets very, very specific. So let's actually cash this out. We've been circling her in the fog. We need to put a real silhouette on Luffy's mother. Here are the hard constraints the story already gives us. She's already drawn, per Oda, which means she exists somewhere in the published material, not in some secret notebook. She was alive at Luffy's birth, but is completely absent from his upbringing in Fuchsia. Dragon, Garp, and almost certainly Ivankov know exactly who she is. And Rayleigh's whole "I could tell you, but do you really want to know" speech quietly confirms that Luffy's parents are a known sensitive topic, not a blank space the author forgot to fill. Now stack Dragon's tattoo on top of that. It's a late addition to his design, which in Oda speak usually means this is world building, pay attention. It's not a random edgy swirl. It's a stylized crest that doesn't match any world government, marine or noble heraldry we've seen. The most reasonable category for that symbol is clan or homeland. In other words, it's not about Dragon himself. It's about the people he's carrying on his skin. So who is she functionally? A woman from an oppressed people whose emblem is that tattoo. Someone whose island, tribe or kingdom got the O'Hara treatment, or the God Valley treatment, or the Gurgray Terminal Fire treatment, but without the luxury of a name in the history books. She either joins Dragon's early movement, or is the catalyst for it. Maybe she's the one who first tells him about the Void Century. Maybe she's the one who watches her flag burn while the Celestial Dragons call it cleansing. But then something happens. Death, disappearance, forced separation. The story doesn't care which specific tragedy as much as it cares about the emotional category. The moment where Dragon stops being a disillusioned soldier and becomes the most wanted man in the world has to have a face. That face is hers. His tattoo is her crest turned into a scar. It's a political banner and a personal gravestone at the same time. Listen to me, that makes Luffy not just the son of Monkey D. Dragon. It makes him the biological intersection of the D lineage and an erased people whose last surviving mark is inked on his father. Even if we never see her on panel, that bloodline exists. That's the point. And no, she's just some random woman. Does not survive contact with Oda's parent patterns, Roger Ace, Sanji's Vinsmokes, Big Mom's entire flashback. Whenever the author withholds a parent, the reveal reframes a faction, a symbol, an era. This is not a sin. This is not overreading. This is normal Oda writing. Here's the thing. I know the community loves to go full pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. I do it too. But when you combine the design analysis Oda's comments and his obsession with intentional parental foreshadowing, the nobody mum interpretation is the weakest category you can pick. I need you to stop thinking of her as dragon plus mystery woman and start seeing Luffy as the living collision of two rebellions, the D against the celestial dragons and her clan against the kingdoms that burned them, all encoded in that tattoo. And if that's true, then the real question isn't who is she anymore, it's when is Oda going to weaponize that reveal? Which means we need to do the annoying grown-up thing and ask, are we just galaxy braining a cool tattoo because we're bored between chapters? Here's the thing, there are real objections here. Strong ones. And the first is the it's random ink objection. Dragon's tattoo is just a cool design Oda slapped on because revolutionary leader guy needed some edge. Second, Oda might never explain it. We die of old age, the series ends, and that mark is in the same category as what's under Shanks's cloak. Third, the already drawn SBS could be referring to some background nobody in Logtown or Goa. Fourth, we're being pattern-seeking monkeys seeing Jesus in toast, overfitting shapes, and storms onto incomplete data. So let's stress test. I need you to remember how this author actually works. Oda does give random tattoos to background pirates, bar thugs, one-chapter fodder. When he puts a huge asymmetrical frame-dominating mark on a top 5 plot character, that's not the same category. Foreshadowing in his storytelling almost always piggybacks on design. Sanji's curly eyebrows, the 3-skull Jolly Roger, the sun marks on Fishman slaves, those were all cool designs until they weren't. Okay, but maybe he just never pays it off. This is where industry context matters. Dragon isn't a side gag. He's tied to the Void Century, the world government, the final war. If Oda leaves a massive visual motif on that guy forever unexplained, it's not mysterious. It's bad asset management. You don't spend 30 years telling fans Dragon is the world's worst criminal, watch out, and then leave his most distinctive feature as pure vibes. This is not a sin in a messy weekly series. This is normal for most authors. But for someone who retroactively made Kinemon's dragon gag into Wano trauma, a random forever tattoo is the weakest outcome. Already drawn, as a background nobody is technically possible. But listen to me, that answer would be a troll, not a payoff. When Oda says in SBS that Luffy's mother is already drawn, but not important to his adventure, he's talking about spotlight, not existence. A clan mark on Dragon that encodes her homeland and ideology fits that perfectly. And she matters structurally, not as daily life Mon content. And yes, there's a hard limit here. We cannot name her with 100% certainty right now. If I start telling you her exact hair color, her childhood pet, and her favorite stew recipe, that's not theory anymore, that's fanfic. This video is deliberately avoiding that. We're in the business of structure and symbolism, not self-insert headcanons. So the core claim is narrower than I solved Luffy's mum's biography. The claim is, Dragon's tattoo is an intentional clan or tribal mark that encodes Luffy's maternal lineage and homeland, and that this is how Oda has chosen to already draw her presence into the story. The exact woman, future chapters, future SBS, the function of that mark in the writing, that we can argue from pattern. So hold this theory loosely but attentively. Don't marry it. Date it. Every new chapter, every SBS, ask, does this support or contradict the clan mark hypothesis? If Oda drops a flashback or a new island crest or a random slave brand that mirrors Dragon's ink, that's data. And in the next section, I want to walk you through the specific future reveals that would either crown this theory or kill it on the spot. So here's where we zoom out. We just spent all this time building a very specific, very nerdy case about Dragon's tattoo and Luffy's mother, but the bigger question is, what does that actually tell us about how Oda writes? And what does it say about how this community reads him? Remember our 3 categories: foreshadowing, retrofitting, pre-writing. Dragon showing up in Logtown at all? That's pre-writing. The fact that Luffy even has a revolutionary dad, tied to the Void Century endgame, is part of that big planned skeleton Oda had before Chapter 1. The tattoo itself, with all the clan mark implications and the way it potentially points back to Luffy's mother's homeland, that lives on the border between pre-writing and foreshadowing. It smells intentional, it feels planned, but the exact meaning of the pattern, the specific "oh, that's Mom's tribe" reveal, is probably a foreshadowed payoff slotted into that pre-written frame. Now contrast that with Luffy's mother as a presence in the story. Oda has literally said she's already drawn, she exists. He just refuses to spotlight her because it's not important to Luffy's adventure. That is pre-writing in the most boring, grounded sense. He decided the parents, the family structure, the emotional tone of Luffy's childhood before publication. Then he used foreshadowing very sparingly. Rayleigh's "I won't pry into family," Garp dodging questions, Dragon never mentioning her. Those are negative space hints. They're not proof that Oda had a 40-page flashback scripted in 1997. They're proof he knew the boundaries. Here's the thing. Giving Oda credit for that level of pre-writing and symbolic layering is actually more respectful than pretending he is some omniscient god who mapped every panel transition before the anime even had an opening. When you insist every coincidence is 4D chess, you erase the actual craft. You flatten the difference between "I planned this reveal for 20 years and I noticed an old panel and found a smart way to reuse it, and this is not a sin." Retrofitting is not bad writing. This is fine. This is normal. Long-form storytelling is messy and improvisational, even with a blueprint. The problem is when fans turn every cloud formation, every random tattoo swirl into genius foreshadowing. At that point, you're not analyzing the author anymore. You're being a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast and then yells at Oda when the toast doesn't become canon. I need you to see the joy here. The joy of One Piece is not proving Oda is a god. The joy is tracing how a very human author uses tools, tattoos, timelines, parental absence, throwaway SBS answers to build a world that feels alive. When Dragon's Ink maybe ties to a hidden clan, that's thrilling because you can see the gears. You can see where pre-writing ends, where foreshadowing begins, and where retrofitting cleans up the edges. So when you go chase Imu's identity, or the true meaning of the D, or whatever Shanks was doing before Chapter 1, we need to bring this framework with us. Ask, is this foreshadowing, retrofit, or pre-writing? Am I reading intention, or am I projecting? Listen to me, you can still have fun, you can still theory craft, without turning every shadow on the wall into a confirmed silhouette. And in the next part, I want to show you exactly how that restraint changes, which future Luffy's mum reveals, would actually count as a W for this theory, and which ones should force us to throw it in the trash. If we're going to talk about which reveals would be a W for this theory, we need to get something straight about Luffy himself. I need you to hear this very clearly. Making Luffy the child of the D. And a persecuted clan does not suddenly turn him into anime Jesus with a prophecy punch card. It doesn't shove him into that tired chosen one category where the author quietly flips your favorite idiot into a walking destiny script. Here's the thing. It actually makes him funnier. It makes him more ironic because the more historical weight you stack on this kid, the more absurd it is that he's just out here arguing with meat and picking fights with celestial dragons on pure instinct. He's not reading some clan tablet. He's not quoting a will. He's a pattern-seeking monkey who sees oppression and immediately swings a punch at it. When you reread certain moments through this lens, they don't become retroactive mind control. They become echoes. Luffy walking into Arlong Park and losing his mind over Nami's slavery. His rage at Sabaody when Charlo shoots Hachi, his automatic comfort around people the world calls freaks or criminals, Fishman, Tom Tata, Okama, revolutionaries, all of that can be unconscious resonance with both parents' legacies. Dragon's intentional war against oppression on one side, a hunted clan's survival trauma on the other, distilled down into one idiot who just cannot stand cages. This is not a sin. This is not bad writing. This is how thematic foreshadowing works when it's planned. The author bakes a worldview into the bloodline, then lets the character arrive at those same conclusions through lived experience. Luffy doesn't fight Enies Lobby because my mum's clan was persecuted, so I must oppose the government. He fights Enies Lobby because Robin is crying and a flag needs to burn. The historical rhyme is extra, not cause. And suddenly, Dragon's distance stops reading as worst dad speedrun and starts feeling tragic. If that tattoo really is a clan mark from Luffy's mother's homeland, then Dragon isn't just an absentee father. He's a man who looked at a cursed history and decided the kindest thing he could do was keep his son ignorant. Not to control him, but to give him a shot at being purely himself, unburdened by a story that broke everyone else who carried it. So when the truth about the tattoo and the mother finally drops, I don't think it lands as some Naruto-style, actually destiny jump scare. It lands as confirmation, the story quietly saying, yes, everything you felt about Luffy and oppression and inherited will, that was intentional. And listen to me, Oda's track record backs this. Roger's son Sanji's bloodline, even Momonosuke's birthright. Every time he ties a kid into history, he bends history around their choices, not the other way around. Which is why the real tension isn't, will Luffy lose his agency? The real tension is what kind of reveal can thread that needle. Deepen the tragedy, sharpen the theme, keep Luffy free, and still make Dragon's tattoo feel earned. And that's where we need to get very, very specific about what this theory is actually predicting next. And that very, very specific thing isn't just Dragon's tragic backstory. It's you sitting here watching a multi-hour breakdown of one guy's shoulder and one woman who has never even been named. Listen to me, whether this theory ends up 90% right, 10% right, or filed forever under pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast. The fact that we can do this at all is the point. The density is the point. Most stories cannot sustain a 2-hour argument about a tattoo and an absence. One Piece can, because the author has spent 30 years quietly weaponizing rereads. Here's the thing. Oda does not write for the Wednesday scroll and forget crowd. Knows the people who go back. He packs background gags into Bharati that only become tragic when you know Sanji's parents. He drops a throwaway mantra in Skypiea that only graduates into full foreshadowing when Haki shows up properly hundreds of chapters later. The first time through, it's texture. The third time through, it's evidence. Dragon's tattoo and Luffy's mother live in that exact category. When Dragon first appears in Loketown, the ink is just cool, revolutionary guy design. This is fine. This is normal. You pluck the scar, the cloak, the storm, and you move on. Only when you zoom out, when you've met the Revolutionary Army, heard Oda in SBS say Luffy's mother is already drawn, watched Garp and Rayleigh both dodge direct questions about parents, does that mark on his face start screaming, hey, maybe this isn't random? And Oda rewards you for treating it that way. He has said he hides clan hints and world building in body markings. He has a documented pattern of parents being retroactively loaded with intentional meaning. Roger and Rouge recontextualizing Ace. Judge and Sora reframing Sanji. Big Mum's childhood turning her into a walking thesis statement about hunger. So when Dragon's tattoo starts to rhyme with a certain homeland motif, or a certain fire pattern in Goa, that's not you committing a fandom sin. That's you reading the story in the format it was actually written for. I need you to stop thinking of One Piece as a weekly content drip and start thinking of it as a 100 volume novel being handed to you in annoying little slices. The foreshadowing only looks insane if you assume Oda is making it up on the fly. If you treat it as pre-written and intentionally fragmented, the reread becomes the real experience, and the initial read is just early access. And yes, that means we need to admit something slightly embarrassing. I have spent an objectively unhealthy amount of time pausing on grainy scans of Dragon's shoulder, zooming in until the pixels cry for help. This is not a sin. This is how this storytelling is supposed to work. The madness is part of the design, because Dragon's tattoo and the invisible silhouette of Luffy's mother are not just a mystery, they're a stress test of Oda's whole system. And when you stress test a system, the next step is simple. You see how far it can go before it breaks, or before it proves it was planned from the start. So before we sprint off into the weeds again, I need you to zoom out with me for a second. We've thrown a lot of panels, quotes, and deranged red string on the wall energy at you, and if we don't recap, your brain is going to file this under fun crack theory instead of coherent testable model. Here's the thing. The entire Luffy's mother argument rests on 3 pillars. Not vibes, not what if Oda is just trolling us forever. 3 structural beams. Pillar 1 is Oda's parent pattern and those cursed SBS answers. Every time parents matter, he telegraphs it. Roger and Rouge are baked into Ace's entire existence. Sanji's North Blue origin, the wanted poster weirdness, Mr. Prince, that was a long con for the Vinsmokes. Big Mom's flashback rewires her whole character. Parents in this story are never random background NPCs. And then Oda goes on record and says Luffy's mum is already drawn but he won't spotlight her because it's not important to Luffy's adventure. If you think that means she's some irrelevant townie we'll never care about, you're ignoring his own pattern of intentional writing. In this category of character, he doesn't waste ink. Pillar 2 is the tattoo. Dragon's tattoo was added deliberately. Late in design, in a clan/tribal style Oda has used over and over as shorthand for group identity and trauma. The Kozuki crest, the sun marks on the slaves, the Whitebeard Jolly Roger on Ace's back, these are not fashion choices, they are narrative flags. So when the author slaps a massive asymmetrical storm dragon pattern across the face of the world's most wanted revolutionary, the default assumption in this community should not be cool edgy dad ink. It should be, this is a crest. This encodes where he comes from and what he lost. Pillar 3 is timeline and ideology. Dragon doesn't start as world's worst absentee father. He starts as a man who, at a very specific point in history, turns on the world government so hard he builds an army. That turn lines up suspiciously well with the Goa Kingdom fire, Fusha's backwater status. The cleanest model is that Dragon marries into, or is saved by, a persecuted clan or homeland. That clan is wiped or targeted. The tattoo is their mark. It becomes both a memorial and a manifesto, and crucially, the maternal lineage crest that Luffy unknowingly inherits. Now, stitch that to the foreshadowing framework we built earlier. The tattoo functions as pre-writing. Oda locks in Dragon's clan mark equals key to Luffy's origins before publication. A later focus on Dragon, the Revolutionary Army, Rally dodging questions about parents, Garp's evasiveness, that's the payoff phase, any specific detail he refines later, any extra character he folds into that clan, that's retrofitting. This is not a sin. This is how long-form storytelling survives 25 years without collapsing. So when you hold these three pillars together, Oda's parent pattern, the tattooer's crest, and the timeline of Dragon's ideological break, you don't get a scattered pile of what-ifs. You get a single falsifiable theory. Luffy's mother belongs to a persecuted clan whose symbol Dragon wears on his face, whose destruction radicalized him, and whose existence Oda has been hinting at in plain sight. And I need you to keep that model in your head, because in the next section we're going to see how far it bends when we press it against every on-panel woman, every SBS dodge, and every so-called red herring the story has thrown at us. And here's where I need you to do something harder than solving the Void Sentry. Argue about this without turning your brain or your group chat into Marineford. Because once you start saying Dragon's tattoo proves Luffy's mum is X, the community brain rot hits fast. So, before you jump into the comments, we need to set ground rules. Ground rule 1. Define your terms. When you say foreshadowing, do you mean Oda intentionally planned this from day one, or do you mean this retrofit happens to fit pretty well? Those are not the same category. Foreshadowing, retrofitting, coincidence, headcanon. If you don't label which bucket you're using, you're just throwing word salad at each other and calling it analysis. Here's the thing. This is not a sin. Getting excited and spinning theories is normal. This is fine. The problem is when you start treating cool headcanon as probable canon without changing the label. Say, this is my favorite interpretation of Dragon's tattoo, not this is 100% what the author meant and anyone who disagrees hates storytelling. One of those invites discussion. The other invites a 3-hour Discord war and somebody rage posting a 4-0 tweet thread. I need you to also upgrade your evidence game. I saw a TikTok that said Oda confirmed this is not evidence. In SBS Volume X, Oda says Luffy's mother is already drawn but not important to his adventure. Rayleigh literally says on Sabaody, do you really want to know about your parents? And Oda cuts away is evidence. Panels, SBS, timelines. If you're arguing Dragon's tattoo connects to a persecuted clan, you have to actually line up when the Goa fire happened, when Dragon was active, when Luffy was born. Otherwise, you're just a pattern-seeking monkey who sees Jesus in toast every time Oda draws a swirl. And when you clash with someone who has a different Luffy's mom theory, attack the idea, not the person. Your theory fails the timeline test because Dragon couldn't have met her there is useful. You're a clown for thinking Ginny is involved is not suddenly going to make them uninstall the app and repent. Remember, the author is not reading your quote retweets. You're not scoring debate points. You're stress testing a story. So treat this whole video as a toolkit, not a doctrine. I'm handing you criteria, intentional setup, documented pre-writing, timeline consistency, on-panel payoff. Use those to refine this dragon tattoo theory. Use them to break it. Use them to build a completely different candidate when new chapters drop and Oda casually drops another already drawn woman with a suspiciously familiar mark. Because in the next section, I'm going to run this exact toolkit against every major suspect on the board, and I want you ready to tell me with receipts where the model holds and where it snaps in half. So here's where this stops being a cute headcanon and turns into homework. If we're going to treat the Dragon's Tattoo Clan mother thing as an actual theory and not a horoscope, we need to decide what would count as proof and what would count as a bullet to the head. First category, the tattoo itself. I need you to watch for any panel, any Vivre card blurb, any SBS where Oda finally snaps and goes, "Oh, that? Dragon got this in X place for Y reason." If he says it's just personal art, a cool design he picked up in some random country with zero mention of a clan, a persecuted group, or inherited markings, that doesn't just weaken this theory, it shoves it down the stairs. That would shove the tattoo out of the intentional foreshadowing category and into author thought it looked sick and moved on. This is not a sin, this is normal. But it kills the clan hypothesis. Flip it. If Oda ever writes, even in a throwaway SBS joke, that the tattoo is a traditional pattern from a destroyed kingdom or a mark worn by a certain tribe that the world government hunted down, that's the opposite. That is the author standing up with a megaphone and yelling, "Hey, pattern-seeking monkey, you were supposed to see Jesus in this toast." Into suddenly the design becomes planned world building, and the question stops being, is Luffy's mom from that group, and becomes, why would she not be? Second category, Dragon's past. Any flashback to his youth, his time in Goa, the moment he snapped during the Grey Terminal fire is crucial. Listen to me. If we ever see a woman in those flashbacks whose silhouette, hairstyle or clothing echoes any of the already drawn background women with sun spiral or wind dragon motifs, that's not random. Oda has a habit of planting parents as deja vu silhouettes first, then later going, "Surprise, that was your mum, Roger and Rouge, Judge and Sora." Big Mum's entire disaster of a childhood. Same storytelling pattern. Third category. Explicit talk about Luffy's mother. Any mention of her homeland, her clan, her fate, especially tied to Dragon's revolutionary awakening, is a giant data point. If Dragon says, "I became who I am because of what they did to her people," that's a direct line from tattoo symbol-y persecuted group. Luffy's maternal side. If, on the other hand, we get she was just a normal woman from East Blue, nothing special, and then there's SBS. Oda has already said he's already drawn Luffy's mother. He loves to half joke there before going all in the manga. So any future SBS about dragon tattoos or Luffy's family, treat it as evidence. Not gospel, but evidence. Here's the thing. I don't want you to treat this video as a closed case. Treat it as a lab protocol. We're running a long-term experiment on Oda's pre-writing. Every new chapter, every background crowd shot, every harmless data book is another trial. Does it push the tattoo toward personal doodle or toward clan scar from mum's wiped out homeland? Because in a second, I'm going to walk you through the suspects one by one. And once you see how many women already fit this pattern, you're going to start praying Oda never answers that tattoo question at all. And here's where I have to confess something that probably destroys any remaining illusion that I'm a well-adjusted person. I have spent months, actual calendar months, dissecting a fictional tattoo on a fictional man's fictional face to hunt down a fictional mum. This is not normal behavior. This is not healthy behavior. And yet, somehow, this is fine. Because for me, this stopped being trivia the moment I realized what question I was actually asking. On paper, who is Luffy's mother? Is a fandom party game. It's the same category as what's in the One Piece, or who would win in a fight. But here's the thing. In One Piece, parents are not background NPCs. Parents are the fault lines that run under the entire story. Roger and Rouge, Big Mom's nightmare childhood, Sanji's planned existence in a test tube. Every time Oda touches blood family, it's about inherited will, oppressed peoples, and the cost of choosing freedom over safety. So when I'm chasing Dragon's tattoo, I'm not just pattern-seeking Jesus in toast. I'm asking, what kind of woman raises the future Pirate King's father and then vanishes so completely the world government pretends she never existed? What kind of homeland burns itself into Dragon's skin and then into the Goa Kingdom's trash heap fire on the day Luffy is born? I need you to understand that hits something personal. Found family, choosing your crew over the house you grew up in, realizing the systems that raised you were quietly crushing you. That's not abstract literary analysis for me. That's Tuesday. So when Oda says in SBS, Luffy's mother is already drawn, but she's not important to his adventure, I don't care about her. I hear her tragedy is baked into his freedom so deeply he doesn't even have to look at it. And that's why the shallow theories drive me up the wall. Not because I want to gatekeep the mystery. Not because I think only people with a corkboard and red yarn are allowed to talk about foreshadowing. The problem is when we flatten everything into, she has green hair, dragon has green eyes, boom, mum. We're saying Oda's storytelling is that cheap. We're saying this author, who has planned the Void Century, the Will of D, and Nika from Chapter 1, would treat Luffy's origin as a Where's Waldo background gag. This is not a sin in other stories. This is normal in other manga. But in this series, we need to hold the conversation to the standard the text has already set. Because when a long-term pattern actually clicks, when Dragon's tattoo stops being cool edgy swirl and starts reading as a clan crest from a wiped-out island, tying into Fuchsia, Goa, and the Revolutionary Army's obsession with burned countries, it's the moment the gun on the mantle isn't just a prop. It's evidence from a crime scene you finally solved. I want you to feel that. I want to hand you that rush and go, see, we're not crazy. It really was intentional. And yeah, I'm fully aware this means we are all slightly broken together. You don't sit through a 2+ hour breakdown of one man's face tattoo unless something in your brain is wired for this exact nonsense. But that's why I love this community. Even if you walk away thinking my dragon theory is nonsense, the fact that you stayed, argued in the comments, pulled your own panels, that makes you my people. Listen to me. You are already on the ship. You're already part of this obsessive crew. So now that we've established why I care way too much, let's actually put that care to work and start walking through the suspects Oda has already drawn in front of us. So here's where we have to be honest with ourselves. We started as a community that saw Luffy's mum in every bartender, every random villager, about every woman who made eye contact with a D on panel. And we ended up here, staring at one piece of ink on Dragon's face that quietly ties together Goa, the fire, and a missing clan Oda has been tiptoeing around for decades. That's not an accident. That's not just cool rebel dad design. Dragon's tattoo is the one consistent visual author-controlled element that never changes across time skips, angles, or art shifts. The cloak changes, the hair shifts, the scar is ambiguous, but the tattoo? Locked. Which means if you're Oda and you want a single image that bridges ideology, backstory, and a hidden maternal bloodline, you etch it into the skin of the man who walked away from Fuchsia Village and from his own son. Here's the thing. When you strip away the pattern-seeking monkey part of our brains that sees Jesus in toast, Dragon's tattoo is the cleanest piece of foreshadowing we have for Luffy's mother. It's visual, it's repeatable, it's under total author control. No translation issues, no dialogue wiggling, just a mark that can match a crest, a ruin, a grave, or a flashback panel whenever Oda decides the time bomb goes off. And I need you to notice how much this honors Oda's actual process. We're not saying Oda is a mystical genius who randomly doodled a swirl and then retrofitted it 20 years later. We're saying this is pre-writing. This is an author who already decided that Luffy's mother came from a persecuted clan, that her homeland burned the way Grey Terminal burned, and then baked that decision into Dragon's design so he could pay it off on his own schedule. This is not a sin. This is not overthinking. This is literally respecting how he builds long-term storytelling. Think about the pattern. Roger and Ace, hidden parent, persecuted era, tragic fallout. And the Vinsmoke's mysterious origin, weird bounty, then the bloodline reveal that recontextualizes everything. Big Mum, child of a broken age, trauma that spawns an empire. Oda's category for parents is consistent. Clan first, persecution second, revolutionary catalyst third. So when we map that onto Luffy, and the only stable clue is Dragon's tattoo, are we really reaching? Or are we finally reading the page the way the author planned? Listen to me. The exact details will probably blindside us. The name of the clan, the island, whether we've already seen her in a crowd, those specifics can still twist. This is fine, this is normal. Broad strokes. A mother from a hunted people, a father radicalized by what was done to her, a son carrying that symbol in his smile without even knowing it. That framework is very hard to unsee once you line up the panels. So I want you to walk away with one image. Dragon, in the rain at Logtown, wind howling, smoke curling, and that tattoo cutting through the gloom. Not just a cool shot, but a silent promise. Somewhere ahead, the woman and the people behind that mark are going to step out of the smoke, and when they do, you'll realize Oda has been pointing at her through Dragon's skin from the very beginning. So now it's your turn to stare at that panel in the rain and either say, yeah, this tracks, or no, you absolute pattern-seeking monkey, you're seeing Jesus in Dragon's shoulder. Both responses are useful. Both responses can actually move this theory forward. If you do one thing, be specific. I need you to turn the comments into an actual archive, not a vibes poll. Don't just write W theory or this is dumb. If you think Dragon's tattoo really is a clan mark tied to Luffy's mother's homeland, drop the exact chapter and panel where you think Oda is. If you think I'm forcing it, I want the chapter and panel where you think Oda kills this on sight. We need receipts. We need the early Goa Kingdom shots, the Fuchsia village backgrounds, the revolutionary bases, all lined up in one place so future gremlins can dig through them. Here's the thing. A lot of you are visual thinkers in a way I am absolutely not. I'm over here zooming into grainy SBS scans while some of you are casually redrawing whole spreads for fun. So I need the artists and editors to go wild, do side-by-side comparisons of Dragon's tattoo with other symbols, Skypea wing patterns, Shandian markings, Sun Pirate tattoos, Wano clan crests, whatever your brain pings on. If you spot a curve or motif that matches something Oda has already drawn for a specific culture, that's huge. If you prove it's totally unique and disconnected from anything, that's also huge because it pushes this out of the foreshadowing category and into cool but meaningless ink. Timeline nerds, you know who you are. The people who treat the SBS dates and cover story travel times as sacred scripture. This is your playground. I laid out one planned chronology for Dragon meeting Luffy's mother, Luffy's birth, the Goa fire, and the Revolutionary Army's growth. Your job is to stress test it. Does Dragon actually have the time to father a kid in this hypothetical homeland, get radicalized there, then show up in East Blue when he does? Or does some tiny date Oda dropped in a margin completely nuke that sequence? This is not a sin. This is normal. This is how you refine constraints until only a few origins for Luffy's mother are even mathematically possible. And if you disagree with the whole premise, I'm begging you, don't just default to, well, my headcanon is she's a random bartender. Build a counter theory that still respects the framework we've been using. Intentional setup, retrofitting, pre-writing. If Dragon's tattoo is not a maternal clan mark, then what is it, in author terms? A future payoff? A retrofit waiting to happen? Pure aesthetic noise? Walk it through the same storytelling categories with examples. Because this isn't my theory versus your theory. This is all of us trying to read Oda as carefully as he deserves, knowing the manga itself will eventually walk in, slam the final reveal on the table, and tell us which patterns were real and which were just toast Jesus hallucinations. And to really test how far this method can go, We're going to take it to an even bigger, nastier mystery next. But here's the thing. If you're still here, at the end of a video where we spent this much time on one man's face tattoo, and an invisible woman who may or may not have already been drawn in the background of some Goa crowd shot, you are my people. I need you to understand what category you fall into now. You are no longer a casual fan. You are part of a tiny cult of gremlins who will pause on a blurry revolutionary panel to check if a sleeve pattern matches Dragon's ink. This is not a sin. This is fine. This is normal. At least, it's normal for this community. So if you haven't already, subscribe, follow, do the button ritual, whatever platform you're on. Not because I need a number to go up, but because we need a stable little ship of unreasonably invested people to ride this all the way to the end of One Piece. When Oda finally drops the chapter that explains Dragon's tattoo and quietly slides Luffy's mother into frame, I want you here so we can all point at the page and yell, "There, that's what we were circling." In the meantime, I need you to re-watch or reread with this lens on. Go back to Goa and actually stare at the fire, the nobles, the refugees. Run Logtown again and watch Dragon's entrance as if the tattoo is a clan mark, not random cool guy ink. Hit every revolutionary scene from Baltigo to Kamabaka and ask if this symbol is tied to Luffy's mother's homeland, who reacts to it, who recognizes it, who doesn't. Suddenly the same panels become a different story. And don't hoard this in your brain like a dragon on a horde of headcanons. Share the video with that one friend who loves overthinking foreshadowing. The one who sends you SBS screenshots at 3 a.m. Tell them this is not proof. It's a conversation piece. It's an example of how we read and misread intentional planning. How an author's long game can turn us into pattern-seeking monkeys who see Jesus in toast and then write essays about the bread. Because this is just one node in a bigger project. The same framework we used here, separating real foreshadowing from retrofits, checking it against author statements, demanding consistency. This is the toolset. Next targets are nastier. Emu's whole deal, the actual function of the D initial, what Shanks is doing structurally in the story. If Dragon's tattoo and Luffy's mother are the warm-up, those are the boss fights. Listen to me. When the manga finally spells it out, when we get the panel that says, this is Luffy's mother, this is Dragon's mark, here's why it all mattered, everyone who watched this gets to say, we were at least in the right ocean. Not the exact island maybe, but the right sea. And honestly, that's half the fun of long-form storytelling. So stay on the ship, stay until the end of the story, because the next thing we're about to dissect makes Dragon's tattoo look simple.